I never should have.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We will resume the public hearing for April 25th, 2017. We will continue the continued items on the BZ calendar. Item number 21, 2016, 4166 BZ, 2579 East 17th Street, Brooklyn.
Hello, good afternoon, Eric Palatnik. Thank you for making the time to hear from us today. And with us here today is the project team, which you've probably come to know fairly well by now, and they're all back again. We attended your review session yesterday, and we've created some information to respond to the board's concerns and to the board's, the issues that we heard discussed. I think that the threshold issue that I heard yesterday, well, let me start from the beginning. The applicant, since our last submission, has tried to document their good faith by changing the uses within the building at the 4th floor to reduce the required parking. And what we were doing by doing that is by changing it to a community center, we've reduced the required parking down to a total required number of 20 spaces with 4 free. Now, Madam Chair, you raised the question yesterday, and when we all went back to our books in the evening, you were correct. You were asking, how did we get to that number 20, as opposed to, because it should be 1 space per 10 for every 10 people. So Mr. Palermo, who's the project architect, went back and he agrees with you. So he went back and he amended that floor plan. And I'm going to pass it up to you in a second. But what that floor, the change in the floor plan essentially does is leaves half of that floor as a community center and leaves the other half of that floor as accessory storage space, which has a much lower parking count of 1 per 2,000. That brings us to 21 spaces that would be required, not 20 that we had as of yesterday, with 3 free ones. Now, the reason we're doing this, even though the owner came here in good faith to develop as an office building and as a medical building, is because the board had raised concerns about the spaces that are available for queuing. So the owner is willing to take a reduction in his achievable rents within the building and is willing to have a more tough time marketing that floor because he recognizes the concern the board placed in having the amount of queuable spaces. So by changing it the way we've changed it, we've brought us to a spot where we have 3 spaces for which the car is to circulate in. I'll pass up the plans in a second. You can see that, and you can speak with the architect about it. I'm just going to talk in a little bit in a bigger picture and then let each of the experts speak specifically. When you spoke yesterday, Madam Chair, at the review session, I think there was also some questions raised about the driveway width and that it's only 9 feet wide. And I didn't sleep at all last night because this case, even though it's a very simple fact pattern, it's gotten into a very intense spot. So I'm saying to myself all night, there's got to be a million parking garages that I've driven into just within the last 6 months that are just 9 feet wide. Why is the chair so upset about this 9-foot wide parking garage? Because they exist around the city, especially since this 9-foot wide drive aisle has already been approved by the Department of Buildings. So the condition that we're talking about, the 9 feet, whether it's good for 1 car to come in or not, I can see the Madam Chair's concern. It's a single-lane roadway. So that's, I believe, what the concern you might have been expressing is. But we went out, and I'm going to pass up in a moment. Jessica, if you could help me out for a second. Pass up this one. One of these. One of these. Wait, there's more. There's more. But if you could just save me one of each, Jess. I'm sorry, I should have said that. Just save me. I can pull one out. So, and we can talk more, and Frank is here, and I'm just showing you, I want to try to, we're trying to come to you in good faith. Nobody brought this application. We're recognizing Madam Chair is finding some uncomfortableness with the application. And nobody did anything to try to come and build a building first and ram it down your throat after. Actually, what they did first was they went to the Department of Buildings and made sure that the commissioner himself, Ira Gluckman, looked at the parking layout. Well, this is all going on. I'll let this pass up.
Sorry, just a second.
That's okay.
Created havoc by handing.
These things, I know, once I start handing it out, I got to get a PowerPoint and just start clicking, right?
Exactly.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
It happens. You should see our copy machine. So, what I just passed up, since you have it all in front of you, are examples of other driveways just that I came up with between 2 o'clock in the morning, waking up to go to the bathroom, not going back to sleep, and this morning. And I haven't even set Frank out on it, and I get up a lot to go to the bathroom, unfortunately. I passed up to you, I asked Frank, I go, Frank, don't you know of any buildings that have a drive aisle of 9 feet? And Frank goes, yeah, right next door to our office. I'll go out and take a picture of it on my way out the door. So this is a building in Astoria. Now, I'm not talking to the fact of the movement of cars in and out, of the volume of cars. I'm just simply setting forth the idea, just for a discussion, that the 9-foot driveway is not so uncommon. As a matter of fact, this second plan, which is this, is a BSA approval for a parking garage with very little space downstairs for queuing, for the movement of cars, I might say. But despite that, because it's not why I'm submitting this to you, I'm giving this to you just as another example of a 9-foot drive aisle. And this is right down the block from this property. This is at 1502 Avenue Z.
But, so it's not the width of the drive aisle?
Right.
It's the
Oh, God, I had a
absence
whole
of a
thing.
place? I mean, it is the width of the drive aisle because it's not two ways, but it's the width of the drive aisle plus the fact that there's no maneuverability.
Well, that I'm coming to.
Yeah,
I'm going to get
okay.
to, I'm going to come to that in a second. I just want to just sort of normalize all of us on the 9-foot driveway. This one right here with the gentleman with the shopping cart, or the thing in front, is a building that's at 2615 East 17th Street. That's a half a block away. That's if you go over Avenue Z in the southward direction from our property, here's this driveway. And then,
But we don't know what's inside.
we don't know
Or
what's
you do?
inside, but I'm
That
just
could be a
showing you because
one-car parking spot.
I'm just having the conversation with the board, we've all been talking about 9-foot driveways, and I just want to set forth the idea that, listen, I'm not from outer space, this is going on all over the place. This one is my all-time favorite. This last one is in Flushing. It's at the end of 39th Avenue where it dead ends into Union. It's one right across where they just built the new shopping center, the new development on the municipal lot. When I go in there, I am amazed that my car does not come out whaled on all sides of it. This driveway is 9 feet. There's only 2 spots for cars to queue in the front, and it's a public parking garage, and I've never been downstairs. But if I tell you I'm amazed that this car gets down here and it comes back up and then the attendants move the cars around and people come in and people come out in the middle of downtown Flushing at a busiest intersection and the cars are coming in and out and there's never a problem. Why am I telling you all this? Just simply to set forth the idea that what we're asking for here is done all around the city all the time.
This one has, your favorite one?
Yeah.
Has this huge setback in front where it's obviously used for cars that to drive up to the liquor store or whatever it is.
Right, they don't drive down. We're going to get to the down. I'm going to go down in a second with Chuck. Chuck's got the down with the queuing and all of that. But to go to your point, since you're taking me there, the project has been designed, and Chuck is going to go through in a second, Frank Feliciato. I keep calling you Chuck Olivio. His partner. That's Frank Feliciato, who's Chuck's partner. The project has been designed and redesigned now at the board's request to create 3 more spaces down at the cellar level where the parking is occurring. 3 of the 4 spaces on one lift will be just for cars for reserved spaces. So what you're talking about, these 2 spaces that we were just showing you up front, that you were saying, well, they have the space to move, that's going to happen here down at the bottom. Not only that, every car that comes into that property, that comes down the driveway, has full priority. There'll never be a conflict in the driveway. There'll be 2 attendants on site all the time, and when the attendant goes to bring a car up out for a customer, there'll be another attendant in the driveway signaling them if they can go up or they can't go up. So the downward car will always be in control. The downward car will be the one that will be driven by a patron, and there'll be signage to direct the patron down to it. If I could just pass up another document.
You're going to demonstrate, somebody's going to demonstrate that on the plan
Yeah.
somehow, right?
What do you want me to?
Just give it to Madam Chair and they'll pass it along.
Just in case you don't have.
Thanks. And then bring it back here. All right. Make you work.
I need the cardio. This counts as cardio. So the other thing I just wanted to pass up as the conversation goes is just to solidify the good faith of the applicant. I don't know if you've seen this in your files, but this is the recon from the Department of Buildings from July of 2015, in which, as is the requirement in the Department of Buildings in New York City, before anybody could build a parking garage with valet parking, you have to go to the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings for the exact concerns that Madam Chair has with the ability for cars to maneuver into the lot. And this is a requirement. This isn't something that Mr. Palermo did just to the thought that one day he may have to come to you. It's simply because Department of Buildings shares the same exact concerns that Madam Chair had, that cars might not be able to maneuver around in an as-of-right valet situation. And they want to make sure, before Mr. Palermo and his colleagues go around the city, littering the city with parking garages, with valets, that what they're proposing in their plans meets the city's specifications. So what you could see, and I'm just showing you this to show you the good faith of the applicant. I know they're here with a building that was built already, but they really did go to Department of Buildings first to make sure that the very issue that the board is complaining of right now is in fact addressed to the codes in the New York City Department of Buildings. And what the Department of Buildings is asking us to comply with are the very same regulations that you're asking us to comply with. In other words, we don't have to go to Department of Buildings for a special permit for this. We just, if I file an as-of-right parking garage, I have to do this. So I'm just simply trying to set forth to the board and normalize the fact and put the good faith of the applicant in place that they are willing to lose space. They recognize your concern, even though we've had this discussion with the board. It's not necessarily always within the board's purview, but Madam Chair, you feel it is, and we've acquiesced and we agree, and we're giving you the space that you say you want and that it should have.
Question.
Yes.
So this notice of objections has sign-off dates next to all the objections, but not next to objection 15, for example.
Not next to objection.
So-
While you're saying that here, I'll have one more copy.
Unless maybe, I'm reading it really fast, so maybe some of these additional pages are related to objection 15, or?
I guess that's the CRD.
Mr. Palermo is here. Commissioner Gluckman did address the valet parking, but objection 15, let's see what you're
That's
talking
the
about.
one about insufficient maneuver and clearance.
Yeah.
Right, so if you look, the commissioner himself at page 4, he addresses it.
He just wanted additional dimension.
Submitted revised, if you read on page 4, that's the commissioner's, I believe, his statement. Request to accept proposed attended valet quadruple stack parking for required 24 accessory open off-street parking spaces in the rear yard at grade level is approved with conditions. And that's on page 4 of 14. And they go through the conditions that are required. And they had all the plans. They had the same plans. The plans haven't changed. Only the uses have, but the dimensions have not.
So just so I understand, the plans that the DOB reviewed included these stackers and the same number of parking spaces?
Everything identical except for the uses that filled the building. The building was built pursuant to these approved plans. Now, I'm not telling you that again because I know Madam Chair's feeling is, hey, you guys built the building and now I have to live with the consequences. So to accommodate that concern that you had, we trying to sacrifice a portion of the building to create the maneuverability that you're looking for.
And in the DOB plan, it hadn't identified 4 reservoir spaces, now you're proposing 4 reservoir
Yeah, it
spaces.
didn't identify any required reservoir.
So that's an additional space for storage that was not reviewed by DOB.
The changes to the 4th floor were not reviewed by
No,
DOB.
no, the 4 reservoir space, or
The
3
stack.
reservoir.
Now, the three
reservoirs.
reservoir, no, when we presented to Department of Buildings, when Mr. Palermo did, it was for 24 parking spaces.
No reservoir.
No reservoir.
But
Now, we're
you're
saying
proposing less.
21 parking with 3 of those stacker spaces being reserved for reservoir.
So you're trying to accommodate.
We're trying
The
to-
question that we had raised was.
We're really trying, and trust me, the developer is sitting in this room now saying, maybe in the future I won't go this route and build it first and I'll come second. But we had been operating according to a protocol that was in place at Department of Buildings and nobody knew where we were going to be now. So we weren't trying to put something in where it shouldn't be. The final thing which we could clarify, and I guess this would be a good segue to have Chuck and to have Hiram speak. Frank, I'm sorry. Frank, I keep calling you your partner, Chuck. The board had raised questions yesterday about the number of cars. I think, Madam Chair, you thought there was some confusion. I think there's just some confusion in the language they were using. Their facts are the same, and I'd like, on that point, maybe, Frank, you could come up and speak.
The number of cars which.
You said every 4 minutes there was a car coming in. You were concerned about the volume.
That report said every 4 minutes. there
Right,
was a
so
car.
I'll let him clarify that for you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Frank
State your name.
Chotto from Stonefield Engineering. So I had the opportunity to review the minutes from yesterday's executive session as well. It sounded like there was a little bit of, or lack of clarity regarding the 17 versus the 14. 17 vehicles is the maximum parking demand, the accumulation that we would expect at the peak time, 17 parked vehicles. The 14 is the ins and outs during the peak time. So they're not necessarily the same.
Oh, so 3 stay.
Exactly, yes. So the net result from the ins and outs would result in that. So the 14 could be 5 entering, 9 exiting, it could be 3 entering, 11 exiting. It really just depends on the comings and goings. That's where the 1 car per every 4 minutes in the peak hour is coming from. So the reports were coordinated. We did coordinate with EPDSCO's office, and so our report references those exact numbers. Just kind of bridging upon what Eric already introduced, we will be keeping the southerlymost stacker and
You can bring the microphone.
Sure. So last time I was here, I put this up on the board just for the sake of discussing through it. There were 6 stackers, 4 high, and we were not proposing at the time any reservoir space. What we are doing now is the southerlymost stacker, stacker 1, will be kept 3/4 open all the time. So 3 out of the 4 spaces will remain empty at all times. So that leaves parking for 21 vehicles. The peak demand is 17 as per the revised EPDSCO report. So you actually have, separate from the 3 reservoir spaces, you actually have an additional 4, depending on how the valets will, layer the parking as they put them up and down, an additional 4 spaces. So our proposal was to keep this stacker largely open just because it is the most accessible to the street. As someone comes in, they're staring straight at it, they can surrender their vehicle to the valet, and the valet can take it directly in if they need to jostle around at some point to get it into one of these other stackers. That's the quickest way to get this car out of the driveway throat, is by putting it into this first stacker, which will be 75% open at all times. So that was the thinking behind a little bit of the operations plan. Eric did a nice job talking about the 9-foot driveway width. If there's any specific questions about that, I can discuss that.
Can you just take, I'm not sure I'm buying the 17 peak demand because it used to be 24 peak demand, right, or sorry, 29 peak demand, so
Right.
I'm a little confused about how that happened, but if you just work on the 17 peak demand, there's cars in all the slots for the 17, right? How do you, a car is coming up the driveway, wants to park. Another car, because it's every 4 minutes, and I don't know how you figured out what happens at every 4-minute interval, but anyway, a car wants to leave. How are you dealing with bringing in a car and taking out a car when essentially all the stackers are spoken for?
Sure. So I want to just, Eric, can we circulate the additional plan that I had prepared? I think you have enough copies. So we prepared a plan just in response to the, this one, to the feedback from yesterday. And I'll go through sort of the logistics, but what we wanted to do is add a little bit more signage and markings to the plan, just to make it abundantly clear to anyone who's coming off the street where to stop, where to surrender the car, etc. The idea here being that inbound is always prioritized. We heard your concerns at the first hearing about not wanting to queue onto the street, not wanting to block a sidewalk, not wanting to hang out in the middle of 17th Street like the car wash does. We want to avoid that completely. So the idea being that we would implement a stop line right where the building chamfers in the back there. There'd be a stop line there with an overhead LED sign that says stop here and exit vehicle. So it's abundantly clear that if you're a customer coming in, you're not going to go any farther than that point without a valet coming and taking your car. Prior to that is a sign that just says pull forward to stop line, kind of dummy proofing it a little bit in terms of where they need to stop. And then on the outbound, I know I'm kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but on the outbound, what we're willing to do is agree to a no left turn sign just to just to really try to cut down on any excessive turning maneuvers in the vicinity of not only the signalized intersection, but also the car wash. Now, so in terms of Madam Chair's question with respect to how to get that car down, let's assume the worst case, you have someone at the top of lift 5, and there are 3 cars below that person. What we have here is we have a valet who will reverse out and move each of the 3 cars below into the first stacker, which recall is 3 cars clear at that point. So we did design it so that whatever the worst case is, that top vehicle, you could still put those 3 in. I remember the hearing we were at prior, there was a lot of concern about, well, where are you going to put those 3 cars? So we do have a place now for that. Additionally, the 17, and I know, Madam Chair, you have some questions about that, but don't forget that there's also 4 additional spaces that are not being used in stackers 2 through 6. So the valet will move the cars in. If there's a situation where another car enters during that time, and there could be, that vehicle stops dead in its tracks right here. The operation of moving the cars ceases, and this car is brought in off the street immediately.
How, is there enough room for somebody to get out of the car there, and then they have to walk over to the elevators?
That's right.
In this whole maneuvering area?
That's right. So they'll be able to open their car door. They might have to close the car door, hand the keys off to the valet, and then proceed this way.
What if it's a handicapped person?
I think in that case, the valets would halt all operations, have the person pull up a little bit farther, have them exit the car in a wheelchair, and that'd be the idea there. You know, you have to communicate with the person, understand the situation, and make that judgment call.
But, so you were in the process of moving that car that's in the 5th stacker.
Right.
And putting it into the empty stacker, right?
Right.
Just at the moment when this other car pulls up.
Right.
Right? So how are you juggling those 2 things happening
Yeah.
simultaneously?
Right, so again, it's inbound priority. We do not want to ever have a situation where there's spillback. So if...
How do you prevent that?
Let's say we've only moved 1 car out of stacker 5, and that situation happens. The car that's moved out of stacker 5 goes up, so there's 2 spaces beneath it that are free at that point. This car can pull directly in.
So, but that car that's waiting, that's coming in, needs to wait until the car that just pulled into stacker 1 lifts up to one of the upper levels, right?
Yes. It's a brief period of time. It's a matter of seconds, really.
Is it so that's the thing we talked about the last time. We have had, I think it was Eric's actually, we have had applications where they calibrated how long it takes for each of these things to occur, because if you're talking about departures and arrivals at 4-minute intervals, it's not a lot of time, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
The one thing, just not to interrupt, and only go back, just, Madam Chair, so you're aware, the 4-minute segment that we're talking about is a peak period that occurs in the morning and the evening. And it's the time of day when most of the flow of traffic obviously is in the morning, and obviously in the evening, nobody's coming to the doctor for a 5 o'clock appointment when they're closing at 5.
actually, I need to go back and look at that most recent study, but peak often tends to be fairly constant, like, it's from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, it's pretty much similar demand. So the idea of peak, pretty much the same, like here, if I look at accumulation, yeah, we have peak at 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 1, 1 to 2, da-da-da-da.
So just to clarify on that, the peak demand could be somewhat similar, but the ins and outs that generate that peak demand could be lower. So you could, let's say the peak demand at 1 o'clock is 15, I'm just making a number up, and at 1:15 it's also 15. So in theory it stayed the same, but that change could have been 100 in and 100 out, or let's make it easy, 14 in and 14 out. It could also be 1 in and 1 out. So you can't really just look at the peak demand and say, well, that's how much activity there is. You have to look at the ins and outs, and the ins and outs are, worst case, 14 during the peak hour. Other times it's less.
Yeah, but we're just looking at the data that's given to us,
Sure.
right? And the data that's given to us indicates that there's this peak demand that's pretty much constant between 10 and 4
For parking.
for parking.
Correct.
That's what we're talking about.
But the one per 4 has to do with the frequency at which vehicles either come in or go out, trip generation. What we're mixing here is parking accumulation versus trip generation. So again, let's say at 1 o'clock it's 15, there's 15 people in here. Let's say in that 15-minute period, one person came in and one person came out. That is the same parking demand at 1:15 in the afternoon, and there's been 2 trips, one in and out, one out, which would be very low trip generation. It wouldn't be 1 for every 4.
So, I think what you're saying,
Sure.
if I understand it, as I'm looking at the chart, so for example, the peak is 17, starting at 9 o'clock.
Right.
So before that, 8 to 9, there is a total of 10 vehicles that are coming in. No outs. 9 to 10, 8 vehicles are coming in, 5 vehicles are coming out.
Correct.
So you're looking at that in and out as a determinant as to how much of maneuvering space you need for that.
Well, in that case, there's 13 maneuvers that occur because you have 8 ins and 5 outs.
Yeah.
Right.
So 8 are being moved in and 5 are being moved out. 13, and that's less than that 1 every 4 minutes.
Okay, so if you look at that same chart, I think we're on the same chart.
Yeah.
You're saying then that between 8 and 9, there's 10 cars maneuvering, all of them coming in, totaling 14.
Right.
At 9 to 10, 13 cars are either coming in or out, so that's a lot of activity, accumulating 17. And then all of those similar 17 accumulations that are throughout the day, they're more like 6 or 8 or...
Right.
That's the number, 7 or
Right.
8 during those times.
So what that means is that if, let's say there's eight maneuvers over the course of an hour, that's 8 total ins and outs. Not 8 each, it's 8 total. So 8 maneuvers over the course of an hour is like 7.5 minutes, 1 every 7.5 minutes. And 7.5 minutes is a very long time. If you're just sitting there with a stopwatch, a lot can happen in 7.5 minutes. This is a pretty small property, and these valets are, that's what they do for a living. So when we looked at this and with the 3 available here, not to mention the reserve of 4, because we're not hitting the max of 21, we do feel that there's enough reservoir. Not that I want to say that this is reservoir, but we can also store 3 cars here in an absolute worst case scenario.
That's 3 or 2 cars there?
It really depends on what vehicle it is. If it's 2 larger vehicles, it's 2. If
to
it's,
3.
3 compact cars.
And this is enough for you to be able, so a person pulls up to that and they can still open the door
Yes, they can.
on a 9-foot wide door?
And when the person comes to pick up their car, where do they get in the car?
So you'll get in the car approximately in this location right here. The car will be situated so that really the only thing that the driver will need to do to negotiate is just this straightaway coming out. And remember, we have the valet at the end. That
How
is,
many valets do you have?
we have
2.
2.
2. So one valet will always be in the front just telling people to come in or not come in?
That's what we're gonna have to do, yeah.
You can't just put a red light or something?
Well, the issue with the red light is that has to be, the red light would have to be on the outside of the building, and someone would have to understand what that meant back here in order to behave that way. We want to make it as foolproof as possible, and the best way to do that is having a human
And you will
at
have
the
this, and you'll have the 2 valet operators all throughout the day, or
Yes.
just to?
Whenever the building is open, they'll be there, radio communication.
I have one suggestion, as
Sure.
you were talking through this, as to where the vehicles, when they enter or are about to exit, where they're going to be located. In terms of the plan, there is a area that's been identified where the pedestrians are going to walk once they park the vehicle, I think you need to wrap that around the back of the building.
Like a hatched area?
Right, you need to hatch that area to ensure that that's not going to become a space for vehicles to park.
We can definitely designate that
Right.
with striping, and we could have a sign on the
Yeah.
wall that says,
Yeah, and probably put a ballard, those flexible bollards
Yeah.
along the edge so that,
we'll take a look at that.
Where are you talking about, this little triangle here?
yeah, along this entire route, take the vehicles parking here, so then they will be walking along this.
Oh, right, to create a safe place
A
for
safe-
people to
yeah.
walk.
The other thing I
But
wanted,
I have a question about that, but your maneuverability diagram shows that you need that full arc to be able to get into space
Right.
number 6.
right.
So that you can't have flexible barriers there because every single time you'll smash into them.
So we'll look at that, but we might be able to use a innovative striping or something to convey that that's not to be used as parking. I don't know if a bollard is the most effective way. I think a sign and some markings will be the best in that case, and obviously, you can't move a car if someone's walking in that area. I think the idea being that the valet will handle the car only when someone is not walking in that area. There was one other comment that I saw in the dialogue yesterday. It was regarding the car wash. I think Commissioner
Yes.
Montanez brought that up.
Right.
Just to provide a little bit of clarity about that, and I apologize for being mute on that in the report, other than stating what it was, because when I looked at it, it didn't appear to be a concern, but after I heard the comment, it certainly did. This exhibit that Mr. Palatnik's handing around shows how the car wash actually queues. We were fortunate enough to go on to Google last night, and the queue, you can actually see it forming. And what it does is it wraps around the Avenue Z side, almost as if it was like a parking lane that wrapped around the corner. So,
Exactly what we're trying to avoid.
right, so you can see here that it doesn't interfere with our driveway. It is close, of course, but it doesn't interfere with that driveway. The other thing I want to point out as well is that,
But that's because they're hugging the curb to get into the car wash. Is
yes.
that-
Essentially, it's a parking lane that they've created as a queue.
And that's assuming that nobody's parking along, like, say, Avenue Z there.
Right.
Eric Platic, and just one more thing, it's almost analogous to what I heard Chief Scaduto mention before with the catering hall application. The car wash is illegally utilizing the street. They're not entitled to utilize the street.
They
They're
actually,
queuing,
I think,
and,
vacuuming and cleaning.
yeah, I mean,
Initial cleaning on the sidewalk.
yeah, so I'm not trying to get us out, we're trying to design around it, and I guess it's dumb luck that we're on the side of the driveway where they're not queuing. I'd have a
it's a
much
pedestrian
tougher.
hazard.
Yeah, but it's also, it's also an enforcement issue on the car wash too, but we are trying to accommodate it.
Right. And I also accompanied that with just a quick letter.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get you.
It's okay. It just kind of provides a little bit more information, because this, on its own, this doesn't really say much. As long as we're talking, it does. But the letter just clarifies what's being shown. And I also just wanted to point out, car washes tend to peak on Saturdays and Sundays when people have the time to do that type of thing for the most part. I don't have any proof that this Google image was taken on Saturday, but my guess is that the majority of activity occurs here on the weekend. Our site is fairly dormant on the weekend, so your peak times are really not occurring at the same time. They complement each other rather than compound each other. So I just want to point that out. I know that came up in yesterday's review session.
And that's what this letter says.
That letter clarifies the way the car wash queues. It identifies the no left turn sign that we're going to put up just to eliminate any excessive turning maneuvers there. And it also cites the IT's trip generation manual, which tells the peak times of the car wash.
Okay.
If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No, I think that's it. But for Mr. Rothberg's study, yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Hiram Rothberg. So I listened to the board's comments yesterday as well. And originally, we based our trip generation on DOT's standard rates for medical office facilities. And we certainly understand that the board wasn't particularly happy with using that standard. If there was something comparable or a better facility that we could use to come up with better rates.
You've used that many times.
We have
before.
used it many times, and I will say
And
that...
that was 127 person trips per thousand
That-
gross square feet.
That's correct. So basically what we've come to understand is that the DOT's rates are based on hospital-based medical facilities. So in other words, they're offshoots of the LIJ hospital system, or the North Shore hospital system, or the New York University hospital system, which facilities would tend to get a little more car and foot traffic than some of these neighborhood-type facilities. So what we ended up finding is we found a facility located around the corner from this site on East 14th Street, a small oncology, urology, and gastro medical office facility, which in fact, their sister application is here at the board for a facility on East 16th Street. So we were able, at their existing facility on East 14th Street, to get access to their facility, to get access to be able to interview all the people coming into their facility throughout an entire day to determine a better trip rate for a small medical office facility in this area of Sheepshead Bay. And that's how our numbers from the DOT approved.
From 127 trips.
That's correct.
To 29.4.
That's correct. It was
That's
based.
a tremendous change.
Yeah, well, again, the DOT is based on a citywide survey of hospital-associated facilities.
And the DOT is actually less than the current secret manual, correct?
Okay.
Right?
No, the current secret didn't have a guideline for medical office facilities.
They
That's why
didn't?
they did not.
No.
That's why they,
No,
They
DOT
had for
developed
office,
this,
yeah.
Okay.
To help.
to help the secret
Yeah.
manual, that's
Help the
correct.
secret
But,
manual.
but we took the board's advice, which you'll see on several applications now, that, rather than rely on a citywide DOT study, if we could find something better or more relative or more comparable to the area that we're located in, we're going to use that information. And that information is, based on, now, we rushed to sort of get this in to meet the deadline, so I know that you're looking for some more backup information about the facility we surveyed, the number of doctors and everything else, and the survey sheets, which we'll attach to our study, so we have all of that information.
Okay, so,
But
I'm sorry, but the issue is comparability, right? So
Correct.
we have this new structure that will have however many thousand square feet of, I'm not scrolling to the right number quickly enough, but anyway, we'll have as many X thousands of square feet of medical facility, right? And so you can estimate from that how many medical offices, how many doctors' exam rooms there are, that kind of thing, so that you can decide whether you're comparing to an equivalent facility as opposed to just a little bitty doctor's office or something, because this isn't a small office, even though it's laid out in small floor plates, right? So, go ahead.
No, the gross square footage also in your parking study changed, which I didn't understand why. Previously, your total was 14,405, and now you've increased to 15,719 when you put everything together. So I didn't understand why your gross square feet increased. And then besides just changing the medical office rate, you also changed the commercial office daily person trip rate from 18 per thousand square feet previously to 13 per thousand square feet now.
Okay. That's,
So I didn't understand those changes.
no, I understand. I'll address that. I'll address that. There are different sources based on additional information that we've accumulated.
But so that's the part that's difficult, and we've talked about this before. When you provide a study and the study concludes one thing, and then you, except when specifically directed to by the board, because in one of the cases I think you're referring to, you had a medical facility that's new, think that's your case. It's a medical facility that's new, but actually, it's an expansion on an existing facility they have literally a couple of blocks away. And we said, oh, you're doing exactly the same thing in this site, why don't you use that site since it's a known operation? That's much different than making an assumption that a site in the neighborhood is the same as your site. And ditto for the office space, like if it's seeker guidelines that are driving office space, then what's the argument to not be using seeker guidelines?
Hi, Madam Chair, Eric Palatnik. As you know, we've been bringing quite a few applications recently and having this discussion with you, and you have been quite clear, and I could even go back to the recordings where I have it in my head, where you've said the secret technic manual is a city, there was one case where it helped us, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was working to support the argument. And you were of the belief that the secret manual was citywide and so generic
Right.
that try to get into more of a neighborhood
Right.
and actual data when you can. So we have been doing that, and we've been shaking up all of our applications that we filed at the beginning that had them on, and I've been yelling at Hiram, get out there and actually study it. This one, the marketplace that you're in, and I know there's another application later, and the developer for that happens to be in the room too, and they're all active in the same marketplace, in the southern Brooklyn marketplace. These users, these medical, small office and medical users are analogous across the board in this part of Brooklyn for the most part. You're getting these smaller buildings that are cropping up, and there's a demand for medical space. So because you've got obviously a boom in the population that we're all aware of, and you get to an area like southern Brooklyn, or would be southwestern Brooklyn here, where you don't have the facility. So these are all local doctors, the same doctors that were in the application that we were talking about a moment ago, the same type of doctors. It's just mom and pop doctors. They're not gigantic facilities. Later on, Mr. Rothkrug is going to talk to you about another application where you've got a large institutional user at play. And even in that application, which they're going to testify to, is the parking lot right now is empty a lot of the time. And even in that application you're going to hear in a little while, has a name that you know that operates it, like he was just talking about. So these smaller users, I think that Mr. Rothkrug is giving you good information. I think it's information you could rely upon, and it's actual hands-on information for a very similar facility. I mean, the doctor that we're bringing that application for and the other one, if he didn't have the means to build his own building, he'd be renting a space from this building. So it's the same people. It's.
We just have to establish that it's a similar operation. Right now, it's a conclusion.
We can give you that.
And we don't know anything.
That's easy. I think Mr. Rothkrug could work for a few days and put something together that could clearly show you that.
I also wanted to piggyback on Chuck, Frank, by saying that when he showed, or when the survey showed that in the morning from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. that there'd be 10 cars coming in and maybe 1 or 0 going out, those are the employees of the building. So those employees are being parked in stackers for the entire day. They're not going to be leaving until 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So those cars are going to be put away in the furthest stackers, which are going to leave more reservoir space and more space up front for daily visitors that might be coming in throughout the day. So those 10 cars, which go to the accumulation of 17 cars throughout an entire day, those 10 cars are there. They're there from 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. till 4 or 5 p.m., and those are the regular employees, and it's the same for in the 4 to 5 p.m. with cars going out. Those cars mainly are going out because those are the employees leaving for work, and by that time the valets have everything coordinated and put together to make for car efficiently going in and out of the site during those peak times.
So then there's only, according to your demand study, 7 patients using cars.
Well, ins and outs throughout a day. So it's.
No, but you have an accumulation of 10
employees.
employees.
In the more 10 cars going out, that's 10 cars coming in, I'm sorry, yes.
No, but you're saying there's 10 employees parked throughout the day.
Well, generally an employee will come at 8 or 9 in the morning and they won't
Right.
leave until 4 or 5 in the afternoon, but those cars are put out of the way, which leaves a lot more maneuverability for the stackers and reservoir space up front.
I would just caution saying anything more because just the data says entering 10, leaving at 9 o'clock, and between 9 to 10, leaving 5, so that means of those 10, some
Well,
are
that's
leaving.
some are patients.
So some are
that's
patients,
correct.
some are
Well,
not.
I'm just trying to put forth the argument or the fact that there are employees who are coming throughout the entire day. The valets know who those employees are, and they know where to place their cars so that they're out of the way to leave maneuverability in the garage throughout the entire day.
So the the DOT didn't make a distinction with its 127 trips per 1,000 feet, didn't make a distinction between medical staff, medical personnel, and,
All lumped together.
yeah, all lumped together.
Correct.
But we have seen in some of the EISs where they do break down who's staff and who's patients, right? So I'm just curious whether, I'm not saying you need to go back and do this now, but maybe you actually got that from the survey, like how many of the people that you interviewed in the survey were staff versus patients, were, you know?
On the survey sheets that we put out there, we asked for, for staff, and we asked for everybody who was working within the building.
So maybe you could help us understand that a little bit, because
Absolutely.
that's informative as well, as like how many staff actually drive cars to these places. Many may not.
Sure.
So in fact, if they work in the area, they're less likely to drive. Okay. Any other questions from our end? Okay, so are there any speakers on this? Okay, so there's still work to be done. I think we're closer because at least we don't have as many occupied stackers. But I think we need the data to support it, and the fact of the change in the study really needs to be supported, and in future, please don't submit studies with changes where the changes aren't explained, because it just makes us, let's say, it perturbs us.
We don't want that. We're getting there. We're working harder each week to get you exactly where we need to be. So,
Okay.
we could submit anytime the board asks, whatever pleases the board.
How's June 20th? What's the end of May? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, June 20th?
Yeah.
So June 20th for continued and May 31 for submission. That gives you 4 weeks.
Great. Could I ask, and I know it's a lot to ask, if the board is okay with everything? Is it possible?
It's always possible.
That's all we could ask for. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Item number 22, 2016, 4178 BZ, 11 Bond Street, Manhattan.
Good afternoon, Michael Sillerman, Kramer 11, on behalf of the applicant RFR Holding. We attended the board's review session yesterday, and the board has our responsive submission to the issues in the last hearing. Jordan Claffey, RFR's Executive Vice President for Retail, is here to respond to the board's comments concerning the financial analysis and the comparables. RFR is one of the foremost retail landlords in New York City, and Jordan has extensive experience with rents in this area and around the city. Seldorf Architects, Jack Freeman, and our code consultant Metropolis are also available to address other points as needed. Before Jordan speaks, I would like to address briefly 3 of the board's comments myself. First, what drives the requested Use Group 10 waiver is that the building contains 13,014 square feet, 3,014 above what is classified as Use Group 6 for certain uses in the arguably outmoded use definitions of use group 6 in the zoning resolution. So there are many use groups that do not, use group 6 uses that do not have a size limit. Drug store, hardware store, liquor store, stationery store, luggage store, shoe store, sporting goods store, so that any size use group 6 use in those categories could be developed in the subject premises. But carpet stores, clothing stores, furniture stores, electronic stores are considered use group 10 when they exceed 10,000 square feet. And arguably, a carpet store or furniture store is more appropriate to the historic manufacturing and wholesale context of this neighborhood than, let's say, a sporting goods store.
Than a Nike's that happens to be already in Soho?
Well, and I'll address that point in a moment. But that's the origin of the use group 10 request, so that the 3,014 square feet additional, if that's the request, could be accommodated in the building. Second, and to the chair's point, on the question of whether there are large retail establishments nearby and whether use group 10 is appropriate to the neighborhood. As shown on the attached plan, which we previously prepared for Community Board 2, there are approximately 40 retail establishments of 10,000 square feet or more in the surrounding quarter-mile study area, including many in NoHo and several along Lafayette Street. There are also numerous clothing and electronics stores, including Urban Outfitters, Best Buy, and Adidas and Nike along the Broadway corridor in NoHo. We will be submitting these materials to the board. Finally, we did respond to the board's questions regarding Community Board 2's conditions in our April 5th cover letter. Most significantly, we explained that the owner would agree to limit use of the 4th floor to office and other back-of-house activities if there is an approval for a use group 10 use throughout the building. We believe that this would be a reasonable solution, as it would maintain the ability of the owner to rent the building to a single tenant while ensuring, consistent with the intent of the use group 10 limitation, that retail selling space does not exceed 10,000 square feet. So I'd like to call Jordan up to respond on the comparables.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jordan Claffey, head of retail for RFR, AB Rose and Michael Fuchs. Just a little brief background about myself. I specifically focused on retail real estate for the last 13 or so years. The last 5 years have been here in New York City for 2 prominent landlords. AB and Michael at RFR hired me a little over 3 years ago, having never had a retail expert. So I think that, you know, it's good to be with you today to give you my perspective on the retail market from a macro level, and also to dive into NoHo specifically. I think some of the concern or some of the comments here relative to the usability of the building and the existing use group relative to showrooms, I think it's important to point out that retailers like to gather with like-kind retailers and create cross synergies amongst each other. So, you know, the fact that there is a lack of showrooms, kitchen and bath, tile, carpet, etc., within the neighborhood, I think it's pretty obvious or evident to those around us that that's probably not a use that's going to be created or desirable for those types of users, regardless of the effort that we put forth relative to the design or the building. Just the neighborhood in and of itself doesn't support that type of business.
Sorry, why?
Retailers generally like to gather with like-kind other retailers. So you'll find, like, on a corner, you'll have a Dwayne Reed and you'll have a CVS next door because they're competing for the same shopper. So they want to surround themselves with each other so that the shopper has a convenient opportunity
So
to
like
shop
a
with each
Nike
other.
purchaser isn't the same as a person who shops a high-end clothing?
A high-end clothing and a Nike?
Yeah, I mean,
There are,
There-
they sell clothing. I would say that there's a possibility that
Nike's a sporting goods store, right?
they sell some sporting goods, but I would say they predominantly sell clothing. Sneakers.
Sneakers aren't sporting goods? Thought
I
Nike's
consider sporting
considered-
goods like baseball bats and gloves and footballs and tennis rackets.
But don't you have showrooms located in this very area, within 2 blocks in either direction? I happen to know that, for instance, you mentioned like kitchen, bath fittings and stuff. You've got showrooms a couple of blocks south, and you've got showrooms a few blocks north and one over on Broadway.
You're
And
talking
you've
about
got-
wholesale kitchen showrooms?
Yeah, those kitchen and bath showrooms, and
Okay.
you've also got quite a few furniture manufacturers, some of which are on, I believe, Bleecker. There are a couple, so you've got home improvement kind of showroom spaces throughout that area, don't you?
I wouldn't call it predominantly.
Right, but we had asked a pointed question about showrooms, and what we said was, show us through some sort of adjustment what a showroom rent would be.
Sure.
If you used a comparable from an area where there was a wealth of showrooms and showrooms of a very high quality, and do an adjustment for location. And we never received that. What we received was a conclusive statement, kind of like the statement that you're giving now, that wouldn't work. You know, showrooms like to be where showrooms are, so therefore we're not even going to go through the exercise for you. So my statement is, if you want to convince us, you really have to go through the exercise. Otherwise, we're going to sit here and we're going to come up with our own, well, we saw a showroom 2 blocks south, and I saw a showroom 2 blocks north. And so we're not getting enlightened, we're not being convinced. We're actually then just pushing back. And
Well,
so
let's-
it's not really, productive for either of us.
So let's talk about the numbers.
Oh, okay, I just have a question. So when you're talking about showrooms, though, that's the as-of-right ground floor use, right?
Right, well, they said they wanted to create a whole building full of showrooms in the
Oh,
asset,
okay.
right?
So, and that's part of my question is, if one as-of-right, we have an as-of-right version, where the ground floor has to be something like a
Like a
showroom,
showroom.
right, a to-the-trade showroom. But the upper floors can be retail, offices, things like that, so,
Let me ask you a question. The showrooms that you're specifically discussing, do they sell product at retail?
I really don't know. I'm just saying, this would be for you to convince me. I'm just saying what I see in the neighborhood, and I've seen quite a number of these types of, I don't know, I wouldn't say store, but uses.
Well, I would
So
argue-
you
I
could
would
tell
ar-
me
I would argue
whether
if you-
they're,
If you go down 58th Street, where there is, kitchen and bath showrooms at every address, right? Waterworks, for example, kitchen, lighting, bathroom, tile. You can go in there as an architect or designer and buy that product, or you can go in there as a consumer and buy that product, okay? Would you classify that ground level space that you can walk into as retail or showroom? And I think it's a gray area whether or not it's retail or showroom. I don't think it's a gray area relative to this property that we are going to, or hopefully are going to approach a retail concept that is going to create something magnificent and beautiful that is going to feel like a showroom, although you'll be able to go in there and shop as a consumer for retail. I think if you look at the numbers, which I think was a big part of the case that you guys were making relative to what it is that we were saying, you know, the numbers that I can present to you after the fact relative to the second floor, the third floor, and the ground floor that we put together are probably more aggressive than what's being achieved in the market on a like-kind basis. I know there were some comments relative to an address that's adjacent to our property at 10 Bond, and I would argue that that property is not like-kind with respect to 11 Bond. Matter of fact, I think they're extraordinarily different in terms of their physical presence, in terms of the size of their store, the floor print, in terms of the fact that there's no lower level of this property for storage, which means that a ground floor tenant, if independent, would have to use a portion of the ground for storage. Okay? And storage space comes at a much lesser value than you would put on a ground level space. You know, I can point to specifics here.
Right, but that's not what you're not really just asking for retail only on the first floor. You wanted a use group 10, which meant that you could have storage on an upper floor. You
Okay.
could have accessory uses in other places. So to discount your retail comps, saying that the comps have multiple floors for selling or storage or whatever, and discount the rent that you would get from that regarding this space, because this space is only a single story, I'm not convinced by that, because first of all, your proposed is the idea that you're gonna have a multiple story retail space where you could, especially since you do have issues with that fourth floor, use that for storage, because you're not gonna use that for selling floor. Use that for back of the house stuff. And so I don't really buy a 20% discount, I believe it was a 20% discount on the rent
To what?
for this space, based on what you could get at, I think it was 11 or 10
10
bond.
bond.
10 bond.
Well,
So I'm just.
Again, I first of all, the 10 bond deal that was made a while ago. So I don't think it's all that relevant today, because I think if you picked up the paper in recent times, it's evident that the world is shifting, and it's shifting away from retail, and it's shifting more towards an experiential setting. So I think that, you know, whether you call it retail today or showroom today, I think the fact is that shoppers are going into retail stores and they are using the store as a distribution or showroom center, and they are repurposing real estate to figure out a way to keep customers in the store by using the space for multi-uses regardless. Office, showroom, retail, food and beverage. Look at Club Monaco on 5th Avenue, okay? Happens to be one of our assets. It's got a bookstore, flower shop, it's got a coffee shop and retail in the same, underneath the same roof. It's a magnificent store. Arguably, it's changed what happened in Flatiron, and Flatiron has flourished because of it.
Right, so I'm saying.
And the city has benefited from
Yes,
that.
but, so here, for your proposed, you have the opportunity to have that kind of a, you know, a changing kind of situation where you have a spectacular store, you
But
have a great amount of space.
Only if we're able to have the ability to put retail on the ground.
What, all through, what you wanted was use group 10, so you want a large retail store, but I'm saying that your comparables for that aren't showing that bump that you get. There were a number of comments made, and the comments that were made were really aimed at the comparables that were being used and the way that they were being discounted down and not showing the true income
There is-
potential that you could have.
And with all due respect, there is no bump. No one's getting the bump. It's all
No,
based on
I just,
facts.
we need to
mean,
clarify
in
something
today's
a little
day-
bit. I
In today's
think,
day, people aren't going to overpay for real estate.
wait a second. We need to clarify something, because actually I think there's a misunderstanding in the conversation. Like, she's saying something and then you're saying another thing, and they don't seem to be responding to each other. So the first thing is, this request is for two separate uses, okay? Use group 6 retail on the ground floor isn't permitted as of right in the
I understand
district,
that.
right? So that's a very standard ask in this district. Almost every legal retail space in Soho and NoHo has received either a variance or a city planning special permit, or maybe it was grandfathered, right? But otherwise, they're illegal, right?
Right.
So I don't think that there's a lot of dispute here because of the history of the board and everywhere else about the use group 6 on the ground floor. The question is the use group 10 in the entire building to allow you to go more than 10,000 square feet for various retail uses, right? That's what we're really trying to get at. It's not the use group 6 on the ground floor. It's why should you, unlike everybody else in both Soho and NoHo, need to have retail that exceeds only for certain uses the 10,000 square feet. So that's why I asked the question, which was different than the questions that she's asked, that Commissioner Otley Brown is asking, is why can't you have a sporting goods store here, for example, where somebody buys crazily expensive tennis rackets, or there's the place where you buy skiing equipment, which is custom made and all of that definitely fits the Bond Street income market, right? So I actually don't see why you couldn't easily, if you really wanted to take up the whole building with use group, whatever it is, 6. No, use group 6 that doesn't have a limit on floor area, right? So all we're saying is our interest is in the ground floor. We don't see a proof that use group 10 is the solution, whereas use group 6 is as of right upstairs.
Right, and the reason why we didn't see use group 10 as the solution is because in the financial analysis, an argument was being made to us that use group 10 is not conveying any additional monetary value to the project owner or architect in this case. In fact, what was stated was that use group 10 might actually give you less rent for the whole building because an owner would accept a great discount on the rent because they've got one tenant for the whole building. In which case, I'm like, I don't know why a landlord would choose to want to put a use into a building that would give them less money. I didn't find it believable because to us, if you're talking about use group 10, a whole building devoted to a store, that's going to be a pretty spectacular store. It's not going to be a junk store. And so a pretty spectacular store is probably not going to have a problem paying the market rent. And so we were not convinced by that. So there were a number of different comments that were made, some of which we said yesterday, some of which we had said the previous hearing, that was basically talking about whether or not use group 10 was a minimal variance ask, and also questioning use group 6 rents in general to ensure that the potential income from that first floor was exactly where it should be and it wasn't being lowballed. Because that's part of making the determination of whether or not we're at a minimum variance if we also allow use group 10. So there were a number of different questions that were asked that were getting at all different things. Getting at showroom rents, whether or not we could see whether you can get more money from showroom rents, retail rents for that first floor, making sure you got that first floor at the right price point, as well as whether or not there would be a benefit, a monetary benefit to a use group 10, like why do you want it? So we didn't feel that we had satisfactory answers to that. So it's great that you are the expert use group 6, because what I would love to see is that you put together some kind of a report that shows us, gives us the answers to these things, even if it means taking us through an exercise where you end up at the price for a showroom if they're relocating from Midtown to down here because of the locational issues. We're going to discount it by 25%. So maybe that person's getting $100 a square foot for a showroom on 58th Street, but it ends up being $75 a square foot down here because there's a locational adjustment. Take us through the math and convince us. That's why showroom is not likely to get more than what was originally stated in the report. Then take us through retail. You're the expert, so you know. And what we've seen, if you've looked at the report and you've looked at pictures of the comparables, just looking at the retail comparables, very few of them approximate what you could have on your first floor and what you're planning on having on your first floor. And so therefore, if you have, and I could show you a picture right now that I don't think that you would, hold on, let me get a retail comparable that you, here is a retail comparable that I don't think this is at all comparable to what you want to put on your ground floor. Yet, it was given to us as a retail comparable. Is this what you're aiming for? No, right?
you tell us
So,
what you're
I'm looking at a one-story, ages-old retail store, American Olean ceramic.
Four Bond.
4 Bond Street, American Olean ceramic tile. It looks like the store was probably created 40 years ago and is now vacant. So, if I look at this, I'm not gonna find anything you say very convincing. After looking at this, this is really what you're going to use to tell me this is what my first floor in this fabulous building could get, based on what this is gonna
No, but
get?
I think the one property that has been raised to us over and over again is 10
Yeah,
Bond.
you have to
Right, but
sit,
what I'm
stand
saying-
next to the mic,
Oh,
If
sorry.
you,
or at
if-
least hold it in your hand.
if you read the report, and I don't know if you've had a chance to read these financial reports, but please do read the report, because you'll see that coming up with 10 bond was only a response to my previous comments about comparables that were used to predict what the rent would be on that first floor. Similar to this, more than just this. And so that's a
strongly
problem.
disagree with your perspective on the retail rental market. And I think that it's important too, to fast forward to the fact that we're not talking about the past, but we're talking about the current and the future, because this building is far from being delivered. And we will have to represent to you factual data that shows you that, if you're doing an independent upper floor retail or otherwise office tenant within this marketplace in a comparable building, in a comparable size, I have a list here, 33 Bond Street, okay? Ground floor, lower level, second floor, $74. 42 Bond Street, $23.75. Fourth floor, $66. I mean, the facts are here that support the case that if you're doing independent leasing on these floors, okay?
Right,
For
and
each
I'm
floor.
just saying, get the first floor right first, and then you could tell me about
Regardless of
how
the
it
size,
discounts.
regardless of the first floor,
Right.
regardless of the first floor.
But if you look at, but if you look at the comparables that were given in here, when we got the extra comparables at $320 a square foot, which were the 2 new ones that were given to try and round this out, the financial report ended up back at $175 to $200 a square foot, because those 2 $320 square foot first floor stores were discounted down to $200 a square
For
foot.
location, by the way. Like,
For
if you're
location.
going to give us an adjustment, let's not pretend that a going across the street is going to
Or
reduce
even
it.
going
by a lot.
down the block here.
There may be other
Yeah.
reasons to discount those comps, but let's give us those comps, give those reasons.
Well, regarding those comps, you have a rent per year of $792,640 for the first floor of 10 Bond, and that's for 4,896 square
It's
feet.
not on the ground floor.
Okay, that's not on the ground
It's a
floor?
sporting goods
The rent is
store.
higher? Because when you divide those numbers, you don't come up with $320 per square foot. You come up with
It's
about
less.
167.
It's less.
So I don't know if the rent per year is wrong, or the rent per square foot is in error, but the same thing happens with the cellar rent at that location.
It's a blended basis on the square
Then I don't know
foot
how
number,
you
which would raise the
calculated
per
that
square foot number. But
320.
if you looked at our building, and you even used the ground floor rent, which it's not comparable, think about it. Bigger space goes for cheaper prices. It's just the way it is.
Well, it's just-
I can show it to you, but that's what happens. If you lease a space
Right.
that's 10,000 square feet, on a per square foot basis, retailers pay less money.
Right.
Okay, so as the space grows,
Sounds like a
the
bad
rental
idea.
rates on a per square foot basis go down.
Right, and
Yes.
what's your first floor square
Our
footage?
first floor square footage is roughly 3,280 square feet. Okay?
Well, that's not what it
Okay, and what's
says.
here is 4,800 and 2,700, both of which, now talking about 10 Bond, both of which are renting at $320 a square foot.
Which is
So-
based on the ground level. That 4,000 square foot number is a ground and a cellar level combined.
Well, that's
Right,
not the
and
way it's
so-
shown here.
Yeah, you just have it as 4,800,
And then when-
and then you show us a picture of the first floor, and then you say multiple, contains multiple floors,
I
and
understand.
so
that.
you're
When we
discounting
discuss-
down.
When we discussed this, I raised that issue. I
Well, then you
So-
should check those
I have
numbers.
pulled together a long list of retail and office comps that show both the ground values today, 2017, late 2016, fourth quarter, and office comparable properties, comparable in size, comparable in terms, comparable in terms of the types of buildings. Again, I don't believe 10 Bond is a like kind. It's a brand-new construction building. It's got very high ceilings. It's all glass, okay? And it's smaller in size. So it's going to demand, and it was at a time period, it was signed 24 months ago, maybe longer, at a time when retail was extremely different than it is today in terms of, retail rents, concessions, and other things. I think that, frankly, I think that based on today's marketplace and where we're going, without the ability to do a single-tenant building, okay, we're going to be far less valuable than we could be otherwise.
Well, so far you haven't demonstrated that to us, but I also want to point out, since there was conjecture, that the Nike store at 529 Broadway is listed as a use group 6C sporting or athletic store for all of its floors. So that's an as-of-right use throughout the building. It doesn't have a waiver for being also in, that's NoHo. It doesn't have a waiver for the use group 6 uses above the ground floor. So
by getting the use group 6 on the ground floor, because you said
Yeah.
that that's probably something that happens all the time, we would have no limitations on anything we can do within the premises of the building relative to retail.
No, I'm saying that there are many use group 6 uses above the level of the ground floor that are allowed as of right, and sporting or athletic store is one of them, like Nike. And there are others also. They're not clothing stores, but, this is a retail world. And by the way, you could get up to 10,000 square feet on your upper floor,
So
and you would be able to achieve that.
I just want to understand.
So we understand the board's concern, and I consulted with my client. If the issue is that it's not a stretch to allow the use group 6 on the ground floor, that's routinely granted. We were proposing as a condition to make the board comfortable that in a use group 10 use, the upper floor would be limited to back of the house or office activities. And if the board is not comfortable in going in that direction, I think the point is that we can withdraw the request for the use group 10 and just proceed with the request to have use group 6 on the ground floor, and then let the dice roll where they are. See if we can get a use
would
group
be-
6 that acquires.
It would be done, assuming we have the drawings to
Well-
support that. I don't know.
I mean, I think that we still had questions about the value of the building.
Right, we still
Yeah.
haven't,
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother issue. But at least
Focus us.
for use group 6, I would assume you will then present to us all the comparables you have that are letting us know that you're setting the rent for that first floor properly. And, because you said you have that whole list of comps.
Well,
So you would just submit that along with photos so that we could see that it's comparable, and that would take care of that. You still do have the other issue, which has to do with how you valued the existing building, the existing site for your site value, which I don't know if you addressed,
All right,
but,
and
and that's a major issue.
All right, let's address that in a minute. My question is, if we modify the application in this way to withdraw the use group 10 request, would it be feasible for the board to close the hearing and submit papers, or do?
The way that we work is we can close and vote on the same day. It's really only whether you've made your case for already to the satisfaction of, also we had open hazmat issues, I think, still, right? Don't we?
Yeah.
So we still have an open environmental issue on this, so couldn't issue an egg deck, right? so we can't vote without an egg deck. So that's the other reality of it, and that would give you time to clean up the report so that you're responding to the issue of the depreciation of the building, and the other open issues that are specific to then just the change in use on the ground floor.
All right, so what is the board and the chair proposing as a way of going forward to
So,
wrap that up?
Suggesting then, because we still have open environmental issues, you couldn't close today even if we were ready, that you go back and I think the lesser variance drawings already show, no, they don't. Do they show? No, they don't clearly. They have.
Weird.
They're weird, so.
Because
They say use
had-
group 6,
they had-
9,
Yeah,
or-
they had
Yeah,
different use group, they didn't have use group 6 on the upper floors, which we thought was odd.
Right. So the upper floors would just be labeled as conforming uses.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
wouldn't
it
have
could be whatever,
we
but-
don't have to, because there's many conforming uses that you could have on the
But
upper
but
floors.
for the
right?
financial analysis, they should be showing the most lucrative uses. I mean,
Right, and
Right.
based on what you have shown us through the rents that you've put forth, it seems like retail on the upper floors works for every floor more than any other conforming use. That's based on what you've given us in the report
Right.
before. So that's how I would have the other floors.
All right, well, I think, and the point in the lesser variance is that it showed use group 6 on the ground floor, and then a different user on the upper floors, which created the issues that the board raised about exiting and egress and what the lobby is. I mean, if we went the direction of use group 6 on the ground floor, it would be possible to find one use group 6 user who could occupy the entire building.
Correct.
And assuming that we can deal with that constraint, I think we would probably be comfortable in demonstrating that would generate a modest but reasonable return.
Okay. So
Right, but bear in mind that if you are going to pursue that, then you should cut that lobby back.
Yes.
Because there's no need to have a
yes.
huge lobby
No,
that you
that's
have,
what
which
he's
is also.
saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to
He's
say for
saying
the record.
we're going to look at it as a single user, use group 6.
The proposed
And-
plan with the use group 6.
Yes, with the use group 6, and we don't have to grant anything because you just have to comply with the zoning with respect to
Right.
use group 6.
Okay. So
Right.
in that scenario, does the board want testimony on the issue of the discount and the value of the existing building?
You still-
Yes, because that is a major portion of your B finding.
You still haven't established that you have a hardship financially because
Right.
of the land value.
Because if your site value goes down, then you don't need as much income to overcome the deficits of the site. And so that's why that becomes important.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jack Freeman here on behalf of the applicant. I'm just looking for a little bit more clarity because I didn't quite understand your comments yesterday that after 47 years, the building had no value? Is that what?
No, here, let's go back
that's
to
why I was-
my original comments was that with the uniqueness finding that you had about obsolescence of the building, I felt that to say that a 100-year-old building had an effective age of 46 was not appropriate, that this building had a far older effective age and therefore had less remaining building value. Your answer to me was that because the building had a significant renovation in 1970, that you felt that an effective age of 46 was appropriate and an effective remaining building value of 70% was appropriate. However, because the board had made a comment about it, you were willing to lower the remaining building percentage down to 60% from 70%. I then went on the ORC's website and looked at how they calculate obsolescence, and they were very clear about a commercial building having to have had periodic major rehabilitation in order to stay competitive. And basically, it says if a building does not receive any maintenance whatsoever for 40 to 50 years, it would undoubtedly have little or no value at the end of this period. Your building here has last had a structural upgrade or rehabilitation in 1970, which is 48 years ago. And so therefore, I believe that your remaining building value is way too high at 60%. And that was my statement. And I'm using the ORPS tables that you were quoting. And this is the ORPS Assessor's Manual for commercial building valuation.
I'll take a look at that. The only thing I want to note is we had done a replacement cost estimate by Bill McQuilkin of McQuilkin Associates, and that was part of the submission. He identified all of the interior work within the building to be roughly 35-37% of the replacement cost of the building. The balance of the work, which has to do with the masonry building and its structure, accounted for the other 60-65% of the cost and the replacement cost. That portion of the building, which is the structure, the floor slabs, the exterior of the building, the roof, which has been maintained, you don't have 40 years without having to deal with a roof, are all in good shape. So approximately, we could throw away and say it has little or no value the 40%, which was the interior renovation that was done before. We're still left with something which is about 60% of the building, which even
But that's
in
not-
insurance underwriting doesn't lose its value. So I'm just trying to seek a value that makes sense based on
Right, but for
the differentiation
appraisal
between.
and assessment purposes, this is how they calculate
I-
the depreciation of the building and its effect on the age of the building. And so to say it's 46 years old, which is relatively young, is not accurate. It's just not accurate. The
Fine,
building is
I would
over
like
100
to
years old. and
accommodate
it's-
and just make note of the fact that using that, if a building hasn't been worked on for a period of time, it has little or no value, seems to me that you could say that buildings in New York that haven't had any major improvement for 40 to 50 years have little or no value, and I don't think that's the case.
No, that's not the case, and you can't say that's the case here, because here,
Well, I'm
part
not
of your
saying that.
argument is that this building is functionally obsolete and can't be used for anything.
Functionally, but not
Right,
physically.
but also has physical deterioration that has not been addressed since 1970. So you've got a combination of issues that are leading to the conclusion that the building does not have an effective age of only 46 years
The
old.
interior was what was renovated in 1970, and we went back and looked at the buildings department inspector. Significant and substantial interior renovation was done to turn this from what was essentially a stable into an occupiable women's shelter.
48 years ago.
That's fine. So I'm trying to understand what percentage of depreciation we should use if 60% of the buildings has not been substantially deteriorated. So, I mean, 50%.
Well, I have to say that when your whole argument is about the condition of this building not being good enough to sustain an income, then you have to come down in building value, in remaining building value for it to make sense. Now, I'm not going to choose a number for you, but you need to look at the manual, okay? Look at the assessment manual and also give us a report detailing every single thing that was actually done in 1970, which we had asked for. And then you settle on a year, but I
Go
could...
along with the appraiser's manual, that portion of the building, which was renovated and not substantially improved since then, has little or no value. That would be the interior improvements in the building. The structure, the windows, the roof, all those things have been maintained over time. There's been no deterioration to the structure.
It has not undergone rehabilitation and modernization. Unless you can detail to me that this building has undergone substantial rehabilitation and modernization within the last 40 years or so, you cannot settle on an effective age of 46. So you'll have to pick a different age.
All I'm saying is that if I look at McQuilkin's cost estimate, and we remove all of the interior renovations, the elevator, the sprinkler, the plumbing, the HVAC, and all of the electrical we're still left with a replacement cost value of about 60% of the
You know what,
building's value.
what you do is you,
And that's all no mechanical
when you're
improvements.
talking about depreciation, you're getting a replacement cost new for an entire building, which is what it would cost to build the building today. And then what you're saying is, because the building is a certain amount of years old, you're gonna go to an effective age, and then based on whether or not the building is in the proper condition, good condition, poor condition, fair condition, you're going to choose a factor, which is your depreciation factor, and you're gonna apply it. And I'm saying that and that's how it's done,
I
okay?
understand.
So 40% off is still not enough.
I got that, but.
All right, so let's not
Even
debate
on
it more.
Right, then
insurance-
it's not even
Just use
debatable.
just use the same guidelines that other appraisers use, and show how you're using the guidelines and applying them, and then we should be there. You shouldn't be debating whether the guidelines that are established, I assume, and accepted by appraisers throughout the
Well,
country.
this is an assessor's manual. It's
It is,
partial.
but you're using depreciation
We-
tables from this assessor's
Right, we used to
manual.
use Marshall and Swift, and I think
Right, but now
collectively,
you're
we
using
reached the
ORPs.
conclusion that Marshall and Swift was not,
Right,
really
but you
correct.
were using
So we
ORPs for
shifted over to ORP,
depreciation.
right.
And so therefore, ORPS's depreciation tables are based on how they value property. Then you go to the manual.
but I will take a look at that. My own experience is that when you're dealing with Marshall and Swift, or even ORP, they're not looking at the fact that the life of a building in New York is substantially longer than their tables would suggest.
Okay.
They're not dealing with.
Can
if
I
you-
suggest, before you continue and debate this, that you back up whichever determination that you make with data sources where you're following through? If you pick one scientific method, then follow through the entire method, and don't use a little piece of this method and a little piece of that
I'll do
method,
that.
right? Okay, so if you select that method, stay with that method all the way through and apply it. And if you're selecting another method, stay with that method all the way in through and apply it. And don't mix apples to oranges, because it makes it impossible for us to review it. Okay? And it'll drag this on indefinitely for no good reason. Okay?
Okay.
So, okay. Do we have everything else covered with respect to that? Good. All right. Are there any speakers on this? Okay, so then, with respect to what we're calling the lesser variance, so from the perspective of the financials, the financial analysis has to show basically use group 6 throughout the whole building, right? Is that what? So use group 6 throughout the building, but from the perspective of the drawings that would ultimately be signed off here, we won't say use group 6, because that limits you to not having any of the other allowable
Right.
uses that you can have above. So it's use group 6 on the ground floor, and the word conforming use on the upper floors.
Right, and
Okay?
the assumption is that we're going to show the reasonable return based on one user throughout the building.
Yes, that's for financial purposes. So you're going to explain that though the drawings say conforming use, you selected a use group 6 to do your analysis on, okay? Okay. And then we still have hazmat to clean up, so if you can move that along. May 6th. What, sorry? May 6th?
May 6th is the promise date.
Okay. All right, and I think that was all the questions. Okay, so May 6th is a promise date, so give a little bit of breathing time. What's our May schedule? Are we impossible at the end of May? No, that doesn't work for end of May anyway, it's not enough submission time. So like June 6th, maybe? Is June 6th horrible? June 20th?
Yeah, 20th would be
20th,
better.
okay. 1, 2,
It's hard to say, guys.
1,
just
2,
assuming that's
3.
it.
So a May 31st submission for a June 20th hearing, and we can close and vote assuming everything is in order. Okay?
So you could close and vote
Yeah.
if the record is complete?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I just need to give this to Paul.
New cases for the zoning calendar. Item number 1,
Yeah, with the glasses.
161-15BZ, 621 East 216th Street, the Bronx.
Good afternoon. Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. Chair, as this is a new hearing, would be happy to present very, very briefly, look at that, very, very briefly, the facts and circumstances of the case, which is a very straightforward case involving one of the programmatic needs of the Church of Pentecost. And I would add that in addition to Amanda Iannotti from my firm, we are joined today by Pastor Stephen M. Fosse of the Church of Pentecost, who he, as well as our other professionals, were kind enough to wait until the first hearing, until this time, so we'd be happy to have him talk to the board for a few minutes about the programmatic needs of the church. We're also joined by architect Bernie Ocasio and by our structural engineer Dan Siegel. We hope to answer all of and any of the board's concerns today with the application and move forward aggressively. Chair, we're very happy to bring this application. This is for Church of Pentecost. The church is a church with over 900 members and is growing, and is indeed the only location for this church in the city of New York, and is also the only church which provides services in Akan, which is a native language to Ghana. So when we look at houses of worship and we look at applications for community facilities like this, and we look at cases for programmatic needs, the greatest cases obviously are those in which, first of all, the square footage and the basic requirements of the zoning are met, and here we do meet them. Well, we have an existing building which is slightly over 20,000 square feet. We have the ability to build on an R6A site within this district on this lot, close to 60,000 square feet. And indeed, for this church, we are only asking for approximately 39,000 square feet. So this really goes to the core of the application, which is that we are asking for minor adjustments in order to reallocate the program space. We did have a representative at the executive session. We do know the board's comments. We do feel we can clarify this, particularly with regards to the as of right, because there was some discussion about structural requirements and whether or not you could lower the roof on the third story, and that is a correct statement. The real thrust of the application is the second point I would make, which is that the application here is, at its core, an effort to enlarge the worship space for the church. Currently, we are only able to house, during the prime hours of worship, approximately 636 members of the church, and the remainder of the program space in the form of the first floor quote-unquote congregation space is used to house the children ministry of well over 200 children. So this is not enough for this growing church. This church at its peak is able, would bring in a minimum of 900 congregants and more, and would also bring in both children and youth ministries in order to all pray at the same time. And so the as of right design, in addition to the structural elements, which actually may not be as pressing, also kind of shorts us on the worship space. The second floor multipurpose room would only be able to house about 300 additional congregants, and the truth is that would barely satisfy the existing congregation demands.
Wait, when you say this is the as of right you're talking about? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So the room being of slightly greater than 3,000 square feet would be able to house approximately 300 congregants. In the proposed, which is inclusive of both the lot coverage and rear yard waivers, we'd be able to house close to 430, which would allow for existing membership plus a slight increase in the number of congregants. So, this church was purchased, this building was purchased by the church in or around 1993. And so for the last 23 to 24 years, the church has operated here admirably without any enlargement to the property. This is really the first substantive work that they've done on this building, and so they do want to make sure that they're able to accommodate their needs currently as well as going slightly into the future. Chair, if you would allow me just to introduce Pastor Stephen, he would be happy to just do a few minutes on the needs of the church, and then we'd be happy to answer questions.
Hello, good evening. My name is Pastor Stephen Kwaku Owusu Amponsa.
Can you speak up, please? Sorry.
The Kwaku means I was born on Wednesday. And I'm the pastor of the church in the Bronx. We have a church that exists in the whole nation, but this is our headquarters. And we began the church with about 9 membership, and now we have grown to about 20,000 nationwide. And here being the headquarters, we have this need, as my attorney mentioned, and that's why we came here. In the first place, I would say thank you and God bless you for inviting us to appear before you. And I know for sure that God will guide us through you, for us to do the right thing for the church as we grow, to accommodate the members, and also to be a help to many people that come there for support. So thank you for allowing us to appear before you. The church, as he mentioned, now we are about 900 members. We meet on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Sunday mornings, we have an English service that is for those who prefer to go to English services. And we have the Akan, that we speak only the Ghanaian language. And also we meet on Wednesday mornings for prayers from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And then also we meet on Wednesday evenings for Bible studies. And we meet on Friday mornings for prayers, and Friday evening also for prayers. And as he mentioned, we are not, the place is becoming too small for us. And also for our children. When you come to church on Sundays and as a pastor, looking at all these children gathered in one place with the noise and with them running around, it becomes very difficult to accommodate that. So we are planning and we are seeking your support to build classrooms for them so that it will be convenient for them and also to help in their growth. So that's why we are here to seek your help to get this done for the glory of God. Bless you.
Okay, thank you.
So, Chair, as Pastor Stephen also mentioned, in addition to the religious worship aspect of the application and in addition to the child and youth ministries, there was also going to be a consolidation of the church's administrative offices at this location. Currently, the offices are divided between New York and Massachusetts. They are the central headquarters for the church within the United States. The idea here would be able to consolidate their services within the building to allow for moving the Massachusetts office staff to this area in order to centralize all the functions. The church is, again, responsible for tens of thousands of congregants and a large number of ministries within the United States. So the administrative function is important as well. I understand that there were a number of discussion points in the executive session. I think the first thing I would address, just because it's the most confusing and can probably alleviate some of the concern, is that the as of right, we discussed from a structural engineering standpoint that the third story would create additional costs for the church in order to reinforce that third story. That was assuming a double-heighted ceiling in the worship space. We can basically go back and look at what would happen if we did not provide a double-height ceiling. Of course, the architect at that point was attempting to show a uniform design, but that's really not the centerpiece of the application. Primarily, what this becomes is one for the programmatic needs of the church, which is basically to allow, at its core, to allow more worshipers to be able to worship here. In that regard, the waivers which we are requesting, and we intend to go back and, subject to this discussion, make revisions to the application, but what we are requesting at its core would be a waiver of lot coverage and a waiver of rear yard. Obviously, in the scope of religious applications, this is relatively modest. As we talked about the floor area, we're at 2/3 of our legal floor area. We'd like to talk to the board about their discussion with regards to the yards and neighboring buildings, but I just wanted to, just on the record, discuss those changes that we're going to make to the as of right to kind of clarify that.
So in other words, we won't have, because the as of, let's say, the expense or inconvenience with the as of right had to do, really, a lot of it with lifting the roof.
Right. And-
So you're
yeah.
going to eliminate lifting the roof. There is obviously let's say, a colonnade that has to be built for the parking that might have some structural impact.
Correct.
Price-wise. I don't know what it would be exactly, but anyway. But I also just want to clarify, because your DOB objection cites to two sections that are different from what you cite in the statement of facts.
Correct.
So I want to make sure you're...
Yeah, we think we're going to review the 23-153 waiver. There had initially been a discussion with regards to separate waivers, but we have to correct that. So we can do that by the next hearing.
All right, so you want to go through...
Sure. I guess at this point I would, well, let me go through some of the points to the extent that the board has specific questions for our architect or engineer. We'd be happy to introduce them and have them speak. I know that there was a question. I guess I'd start, well, some of these just are related to notations on the plans. The board asked that we provide the height above the average curb along Bronx Boulevard and the average curb height and base of plane for calculations. We'll do that on the next set.
And just to back up, the reason for doing that is there's sort of a claim being made in the argument that it's not tall, it's only 33 feet high, but in fact, because this sloping site, it feels a lot taller than that, and we need to understand what that is.
Sure. We're going to revise the south elevation as it appears that the third floor may be wider than it is on the plans. We will provide more detail on the north and east elevations to show treatment of setback portions, particularly on the western portion of the building. The facade, I think the intention was that the facade was going to be maintained, but we're going to revise the elevations in order to match, the enlarged portions would match with the existing facade.
So, okay, so that was part of the confusion, maybe it's just graphics, right?
Sure.
It looks like the facades are being rebuilt. So that would add expense,
Correct.
that's your choice, but then we'd have to understand what's going on,
Understood.
right? So, yeah, it's to clarify, maybe what would be helpful is on the drawings to show existing material versus new versus material to be removed.
Okay.
And show that on the elevations as well, so it's clear.
Okay, great.
Okay.
We're going to respond in particular to the discussions with regards to the as of right, and we just discussed that at length right now. We're going to prepare a rendering, which is putting the building within the context of the area to better represent the existing streetscape, and we understand that Ryan would have samples for us to use. Thank you. The stair and mechanical bulkheads and mechanical equipment will be shown on the elevations, understanding that's an important point, particularly in light of Department of Building subsequent approval. And I know that there was a discussion with regards to van service, which we intend to continue in order to alleviate traffic concerns on the site. I guess as far as a substantive change, I know that the vice chair mentioned the third floor and whether or not that third floor can be set back, because there was that issue with the adjacent residential neighbors and their rear yards. And so in the revised plans, we'd like to, we'd like to explore that. To the extent we're able to do that, we're happy to do that. If there is an issue with that, we would bring that to the board. I know that there was a discussion about need for a changing room. There is, there are regular baptisms which occur at the church. Oftentimes, there'll be upwards of 20 people baptized at one time, so the changing room is provided due to the need to accommodate those members of the church. And then there was a discussion of the multi-purpose room and the frequency of use. This is a heavily utilized multi-purpose room. The idea is that because we understand the nature of minimum variance, and we need to justify the square footage that we're using. And indeed here, the intention is going to be that there would be simultaneous occupancy for many of these uses. When we resubmit, we're going to just highlight some of the information that we put in the program schedule, which is included on page 16 and 17 of the current statement of facts. But right now, the idea would be that while we are currently providing a service in Akon to 600 members and a children's service in Akon to 390 members, with the expanded space and the simultaneous use with the multipurpose room, we will be able to accommodate the 900 members in Akon. We would also be able to accommodate an additional English children and youth service for those children who were attending services in English, and we would basically be able to do all that simultaneously. It's something that sadly we cannot now do. The church has been very patient during the course of the application. This is one of those applications where we're really going to the core function of the church, which is religious space and space for worship, and this is really it. But we're happy to highlight that information on the resubmission.
I had a question, though, also about the classrooms. I'm looking for the schedule right now. But it seemed as if teaching, like the Sunday school classes kind of thing, where there were classes for children of all different age groups, it seems like they were all combined together into one, and we don't see that normally. Usually it's different age groups, and I'm curious about that.
Oh, I think Pastor Stephen would be happy to answer that.
Currently, we have only one room for all the children. So we just normally divide them into age groups, and it's hardly to hear, for the kids to hear you even talking to them. So with this new design, they will have their separate classrooms based on age groups.
Oh, they will have. No, that wasn't clear in what was submitted. It sounded like there were going to be classes in Akon and classes in English, and the children were going to be all together all the ages were going to be mixed together.
No, we're going to group them based on their
By age, okay. Okay, Richard, perhaps you could go back and look at the schedule and clarify, look at the schedule to make sure that it's showing how all of the spaces are going to be used, because there was a question Commissioner Montanez had, I think, about why it seemed like the multipurpose space wasn't being utilized as much, I think.
Right, it's on Sundays, it's for overflow space, and, regarding times when you had like administrative conferences, it didn't seem to be used during the administrative conferences. It was just...
Understood.
It just didn't seem to be used very much.
Right, I think
but the administrative conferences could have been in the first floor space.
I think that the core issue is that at the regular religious service usage during those times, everything's going to be used. And that's going to occur regularly. It's not just going to be on a select holiday. So, but we should clarify that, and we will make it clear in the schedule.
I mean, part of the difficulty is when you do these charts,
Yeah.
if you don't do all day long
Right.
and every single day of the week, and you try to blend them together, it's very confusing.
Understood.
It doesn't make your argument.
We'll clarify that.
And I see that you have 3 sets of bathrooms on the second floor. Is that really necessary?
I think we can probably look at that with a little bit more detail, but we can address that.
Right. And primarily my concern is the rear yard, the 33 feet high, adjacent to these buildings that have minimal rear yards. And this other area.
Right.
More towards Bronx Parkway.
We've
which
already, yeah, we've
can have
already
a
had
third
that.
floor.
Sure, and we've already had that conversation internally and think that we have some neat ideas as far as addressing that, so
Okay.
we're happy to have that opportunity.
Okay. Did we leave anything out? Anybody have any other?
I do have a question on the parking.
Yes.
Is it at all possible to provide some type of stackers to accommodate more parking space?
You know, the parking that we're providing is permitted, not required. We're not asking for waiver parking. I think while we can look at that, I think it's going to be difficult given the layout, but also because it's going to involve additional expenses for the church. So,
This is going to be valet parking?
no, that's not the intention. It's 27 spaces, self-park.
Because even with valet parking, I think you can accommodate more parking spaces, and that goes to a lot of concerns that we have heard is the parking and the on-street parking utilization. And
Yeah, I mean, Vice Chair, I think that we will address this, and we're happy to address this. I think one of the issues for us is that we could basically build, under existing zoning, could build a significantly larger church with no parking. So we would love to accommodate as many spaces as we can. We're happy we got the 27 spaces we did, but we also are sensitive to the fact that the church is a nonprofit. We have limited resources. So again, it's an architectural question. We can look at it. If it's possible, the church would probably love to add spaces to this, but I don't know whether it's possible.
I also don't think you have enough height for stack.
Probably not.
I don't see the section.
Yeah, I
with the
think,
parking
I think we
garage.
get up to,
Oh, it's 10-1.
Yeah.
No, you do.
oh, okay.
I think more than that valet is possible, so that's why.
We can look
But
at that.
Probably
and-
less expensive.
But we
Sure.
don't normally see, I mean, because it's kind of, this is an unusual situation where they're not asking for a parking waiver, right? Most of our religious institutions provide zero parking, and to ask them to have valet parking is an extreme expense, so I think that's not typical of what we do with other institutions, and they're not needing a waiver, they're providing more than what's required, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I don't feel like it's kind of even-handed. We're seeing parking there, so we just
Right.
finished with one difficult parking garage. We're about to have another one, so we're kind of in a parking hen, but those are commercial uses, not religious, so.
Right,
Okay.
okay.
All right, are there any speakers on this? No? Okay. So I guess you know
We know
what you need to do, and
Right.
thank you for going step by step
Sure.
through everything.
Thank you.
Okay, and if you could, just so that we get it in the record, the community board had problems with this because they were claiming it was going to become some office building.
Right.
If you could just really address that, when I look at your plans, I don't see that many offices.
Right.
Plus you have the offices that are getting displaced and they get moved to another place. So maybe you could just address it, you know, what's your sort of delta difference between the office count you have right now and what's being proposed? It's quite a small
Right.
change.
It
It's not
is.
like 50 offices for staff, right?
Right.
So, okay. All right, so how much time do you need? Because you're going to look at you're also going to look at the plans and see if you can relocate the massing a little bit, so that takes time.
Right. After consultation with the project architect, we were looking at, we want to be as aggressive as possible as far as schedule, but he said he'd probably need about 3 weeks to produce plans and such. So whatever works with the board schedule.
What's the 27th of June looking like?
It's fine.
That one's fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, how about come back for continued hearing on June 27th with a submission on June 7th?
June 7th, so that's about 5
Right.
to 6 weeks. Is that it? Okay.
That's-
Correct.
Not quite 6 weeks.
Yeah. All right, we expect to produce an extremely complete
It
response,
should be extremely complete.
And we won't
Your
even-
client will make sure that it's complete,
of course.
right?
And we won't even say that should the board be satisfied on that date, because they always can close and grant on that date.
Close and vote.
Close and vote. Correct. Okay. Well, okay, you want to be like that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Item number 2, 2016-4122BZ, 902 to 912 Quinton Road, Brooklyn.
Good afternoon, Jessica Rubenstein on behalf of Eric Palatnik, PC. We attended yesterday's review session and we heard the board's comments, and we realized that the gist of the comments really boil down to two main issues from our point of view, which is one, how the parking study concluded that there were a maximum parking demand of 73 or 90, depending on which study that you're looking for, parking spaces, and two, how exactly the parking operational plan would be effectuated. We have here today Hiram Rothkrug and Frank Feliciato, who again are here to speak on those two topics. But I first just wanted to give a general overview of the application and perhaps fill in some of the gaps that I heard yesterday. The building right now is an 8-story building with a subcellar and a cellar that is fully utilized. So we have Toro College occupying 4 of the floors, and the rest are doctors, primarily from NYU. Commissioner Montanez, I assume that you are not Jewish, because on April 12th, when you conducted your site visit, it was actually the second day of Passover.
But Toro College was closed?
The building was,
Yeah?
the parking lot was closed, everything
I
was
saw
closed.
patients going in and out of the building.
You were told.
So I was surprised that that the garage was not open.
It was closed? The building was closed.
I saw patients going in and out, an ambulance pulling up to the door on 9th Street and.
So, I don't know.
And I believe it was the borough
We have the
president.
owner's representatives here, and they're saying that the building was
The
closed.
borough president also in his letter, stated that he's never seen the garage open.
Okay. Well, we do have,
Well, that's what his, let me check
We do have-
exactly what his words
It was a
were.
long time.
okay, it's definitely open. We do have pictures that we could show the board. We even had the building manager take pictures of the parking garage this morning that I'd be happy to distribute so the board could see what the parking lot looks like right now. We just weren't sure if we should submit that within our next submission or we should hand it out now. He's my Vanna White.
Long outfit.
Thanks, Eric.
They did.
So,
The second sheet, that's the interior of the parking garage?
so there are 3 floors. According to the building manager, who is here today, I asked him to take the photos this morning on his phone. The ground floor, which is the space that's proposed to be converted to the NYU ambulatory care space, is basically never utilized. The cellar space does have some cars in it, but as you can see, there are some empty spaces as well, and the sub-cellar, as of 11 a.m. this morning, was completely empty. And so Hiram and Frank are here to really speak to the traffic study and the maneuverability, yes?
So I just want, is the building fully operational?
Yes. Okay. And so I know Commissioner...
Except for that ground floor?
Correct. Well, there is a pharmacy on the ground floor right now that serves as an in-house pharmacy to the NYU offices upstairs on the 8th floor. The proposed ambulatory care facility for the first floor will be independent from that in-house pharmacy, but it's still an extension of the uses from the upper floor. So I know that was a question of yours yesterday.
Yes, my question was, would this generate additional trips?
Right, so Hiram is here to speak to that question. The answer is that perhaps there will be additional trips, but at the same time, because it's an extension of the existing use in the building, it's not going to be considered the same as a brand-new use that's there, brand-new offices that'll generate all new employees and all new patients. A lot of the employees will come from the upper floors and will just utilize the space downstairs. Will there be no more trips? I can't say that. But I don't believe that there will
So
be
the total
more.
number of employee will remain the same?
I can confirm that with the building owner. I know that they have signed a lease with NYU. I don't have that definitive answer for you.
There's probably
But I can.
at least employees.
There's definitely going to be overlap. And so,
You need employees.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if in the follow-up documentations, if you can provide what kind of additional trips that would be generated, and the delta of the current and the additional. to
we'd be
help us
happy to
understand
do
the
that.
parking.
And that makes sense. And also, I thought another comment of yours was very insightful yesterday about how the parking study should have analyzed the existing conditions of the building because it's already fully functional and in operation. So instead of relying on, tenuous data sources, not to repeat the conversation that we just had in the last hearing, but it would make sense to analyze the parking, the inbound and outbound trips of the parking lot as it operates right now to see how the reduction would affect those numbers. So Hiram, can you please come up and talk about your study?
Good afternoon, Hiram Rothgroup. So I want to beg the board to basically take what you've seen and unfortunately wasted time to review that I've submitted and know that we recently completed a survey of the existing facility. And that study, while I could have had it available today to hand out, I decided not to because I didn't want to make a whole new submission to the board at a last second when you hadn't had time to review it. So we do have a brand new study based on the existing building and the existing uses and the existing occupants of the building. I will say that 4 floors of the building are occupied by a professional school, Truro Business College, and we found that they tend not to utilize the parking garage wall. There's a tremendous amount of capacity available in the garage that you'll see in our new analysis. To specifically answer exactly what happened, the difference in our original study, we did an original study last March that we submitted to the board as part of our application, which was based on, again, the DOT for the medical office facility, in addition to the Jamaica downtown Jamaica EIS for the office portion and other portions of the building. And then when we started to understand a little more about what the board wanted in terms of the street maps and the parking maps and all the other attachments, we revised the study in September. But what we also did is we revised the trip rates to a different source, which we did not list in our papers. We kept the same source as the Jamaica FEIS, when in fact we had used a different source and we didn't take out Jamaica FEIS and reference the new source, and that's how the difference in the trips occurred. It was an error on our part that we didn't pick up until until we heard your comments yesterday at the executive session. And we really weren't looking at that since we had already gone out and our efforts were made on doing a survey of the existing building.
So since you've done the survey, even though you couldn't hand it in, what's the peak demand with actual numbers? based on the
Actually,
site?
I gave that to Frank, who he has that. He'll come up and I gave him a chart today at the hearing, which will show you the actual demand. So, again, my apologies to the board. This was something that we did early last year, and hadn't learned our lesson at that point.
Is there a fee for for parking?
No.
No fee.
No fee for parking, which is one of the things I asked for, because I didn't understand why the parking was so underutilized. I really think it's the people, the students who are enrolled in the school who don't drive. And I think what we're also finding is that a lot of people don't like to use the accessory parking garage. They'd rather not use valet. They'd rather not have to wait for their car. They'd rather not give their car to somebody. They would rather look for available on-street parking first, as a first resort before using the accessory parking.
So this is currently a valet parking?
It's currently a valet parking, yes. I believe they have 2 valets. So that's just a personal observation from some of the new surveys we've been doing, is that people don't like using valet parking. They want access to their car, they want to leave it, they want to get it when they want it, and they don't want to have to wait.
Okay.
But I think because of the occupancy of the building, and yes, you could say, well, Mr. Roth, they're there today, but, the school might be gone tomorrow. There's actually a 10-year lease with an option to renew after that time with the Truro School. So that school is not disappearing anytime soon.
Okay, with respect to the revised parking study, the word waste of time gets multiplied 5 times or 4 times. Well, let's say it's 5 times because it gets reviewed by both the project manager and other people, the seeker officer. So you're wasting the time of at least 7, if not maybe more people. And it's not okay. It's just not okay.
Yes,
and so I don't know how to say it again because I've said it before. You can't make mistakes on these things because we could also just say, no, you gave us the one that said the demand is 90 spaces, hence it's 94 spaces, hence it's 94 spaces, provide 94 spaces. We don't have to accept all of these revisions if we don't ask for them specifically, right? So if you want us to believe anything that you show, not just on this application, but on any application, the materials have to be so diligently assembled and so carefully proofread that you're bored reading your own document because you've read it so many times and you've checked the numbers so many times and you've cross-checked the references and so on. Because it's not okay to submit this stuff to us. And so it has to have backup. If you're doing a survey, it has to have the backup materials of the survey attached where we don't sit there doing the math. I often do the math because you don't provide it. And then, so for instance, your on-street parking counts also shifted between that first submission and the later submission, or not first, the first and second submission were different than the third submission, where the parking space count changes without any change in the data. So it's like sloppy, it's an understatement. And it's just not okay. Get it together. I'm sorry, I have to say this in public.
I deserve it, I understand.
And then regarding the gross square footage, the plans, I think it came up to 67,000, I think, which is what you're using, but that's the same as shown on the plans, but the plans only show zoning floor area, so that's not the gross square footage. But I guess you're going to revise that anyway, but, it just shouldn't be.
Well, we use gross square footage for all our...
I don't think you did. Because I'm looking at the proposed plans, and it's 67,707 zoning floor area, right? I don't know. Maybe. Is that the total? But I wasn't sure. Whether it was zoning or gross.
We'll resolve it.
But you're not going to be doing it by square footage anymore anyway.
You're
right?
going to do it based on an actual usage of the actual building with an actual
And then
survey, with
Correct.
actual backup that you submit to us that we can actually follow, where it's actually tabulated.
And are you going
You
to
know?
use the DOT data for the first floor then?
No,
No.
no,
Why?
we're using we're using all survey,
It should
This is
just,
similar
Okay.
to the.
we're using all survey information.
So,
right.
okay.
You would just increase it based on an increase in floor area.
area.
Ultimately, you'll come up with a utilization rate based on floor area because there's no other way to do it, right?
Correct.
Unless you can say, no, actually, this is a pharmacy, they have 8 new employees for the pharmacy, and everybody else, this is, that the client would tell you this, that everybody else is coming from upstairs to get the drugs from the pharmacist. I mean, I don't know how it's used, because it seems like an extremely large
Just one
pharmacy.
caution on the surveys, and we've learned this before, is that sometimes they don't like to tell you when they arrive, like they fill out the survey, but they won't say when they got there.
Oh, it's
And so
staff, right.
I mean, in the past, we've just used sort of standard,
Arrival
like
times.
arrival times
Like
that
9
are
to
based
5
on
type things.
on another source, and so there's an art to this as well, and Hiram's
Okay.
done that before.
Okay,
Just
well-
to caution that when you're looking at these, going, why didn't they use so that next
Right, but if there's an art, we want to know what the art
Yeah,
is. I don't want it to be artful, I want to be able to
No, I-
understand,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, and like I said, we had the study, we had completed the study, but I made a determination, I didn't want to give it to the board at the last second, because I didn't think you would have time to
we wouldn't.
review it, and I didn't want to, I just felt it wasn't, I wanted to read it a little more until I was bored. Before
Have all your friends
before-
read it too.
Before I would submit
Most
it.
recent novel.
The other thing is, I mean, it looks like your usage is going to be very low.
The usage is going to be low.
But, when you do your survey, did you ask people if they parked on the street?
We did.
Because since there are so many community complaints, it might be a good idea for the facility to recommend people use the garage, which would increase the usage.
We actually did. In our survey forms, we asked people, and by the way, if you see, my survey forms are in Spanish and English. And it's, are you staff visitor or tenant to the building, occupant to the building? And it's, how did you come here? Did you come by car, bus, taxi? If you came by car, where did you park? And how many people were in the car? So we cover all the points for the modal split and to get the, as much information as possible.
Is it clear to people that the parking is free? Maybe it needs to say, no fee parking for these
You know what,
users.
representatives of the building are here, so they could speak to that. In fact, it was one of the first things that I asked them this morning. I just wanted to make sure. I said, by the way, do you charge for parking? The answer was no. So.
Right, but I mean, what my question was, is it obvious to people who are coming to the facility that parking is free? Maybe they don't, they assume if they go into that garage, there's a sign as they pull in that says how much an hour.
Yeah,
Maybe it should say
that's
free parking for whatever the uses are.
That's something that one of the building representatives can answer better than.
Yeah,
better than-
okay. Okay, and then we also had some questions, a patron waiting area for drop-off and coordination.
Right, Stonefield is going to
Yeah.
testify to that.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Frank Villichelta with Stonefield. So what I wanted to do is, I read through the dialogue from yesterday's executive session, and we've prepared a number of handouts today to kind of clarify how the parking operations plan would work. So, thank you, Hiram. So, I just want to put up essentially a staging exhibit here, and I'll hand out individual copies of this for your use. This is a staging exhibit that just provides a little bit more. First.
Thank you.
Sure. Provides a little bit more detail about what is going on in the throat of the driveway. In terms of what we talked about between yesterday and today. So what you can see here now, we have a 14-foot drive aisle, which is essentially a single lane roadway but it is generously sized for a single lane roadway. 14 feet is very generous. It's much larger than most parking spaces by 40, 50%.
From something that we saw very early on.
Right, much different than that. So that's the 14 feet here. And what we're proposing to do is essentially operate this in a similar way where we prioritize inbound traffic completely. Because this garage is a little bit different with respect to the fact that you come down a ramp, make a turn, and then go down another 2 levels, we really want to remove the layperson from the vehicle as soon as possible and let the valets take them from essentially the threshold point at the building down. I want to point out that the
Sorry,
building...
I didn't
Sure.
understand that. Can you repeat that again?
So this is the ground level plan.
Right.
But essentially what happens is the ramp goes down and then it will go down another level to a sub-cellar. So we don't particularly like the idea of having a layperson, someone who's not familiar with this facility, to do all of that. So we'd rather have them drop off their vehicle to a valet at the threshold, let them go in the building and get to their doctor's appointment.
So they have to walk around to come in the main entrance on the other side?
To come in the main entrance, they will need to walk around, but they could also enter here. There are stairs here, just immediately adjacent to the drive aisle.
They have to go outside.
They would essentially drop off right here.
No, but how do they get in? You're going into a fire stair, right? They have to go outside, there's probably a locked fire stair. Well, it's the fire stair, why would you have people walking a fire
If they have elevators and you
stair?
have an 8-story building, why would they
I
take
think
the
the majority
stairs?
of people would go around the front.
So no wonder nobody parks in this parking lot.
I was just gonna say.
I wouldn't either, and I like parking lots, I wouldn't either.
I mean, it's an existing...
I don't like cars on the street.
Sorry.
Gotcha.
Jessica Rubin.
I like parking lots as a concept, no cars on the street.
Jessica Rubinstein
Right.
on behalf of Eric Palatnik, PC. So last night, we discussed all the different ways to go about where a patron should deliver their keys to the valet, what would be the most appropriate place so that to avoid any kind of collisions down below as well. And the options that we have are what we propose where someone comes, makes a right on Quinton, comes into the drive aisle, hands their keys to the valet, and yes, they do have to walk a few steps around the building to the lobby,
steps.
but otherwise, they would have to, but the other option that we have is there's an attendant down below the ramp, and people could get out there and take the elevator from the inside up to the rest of the building.
That's
Which
how the
is-
building was designed.
Right.
So if that's what the board prefers, we're happy.
No, but
No,
the
you
building
have
was
to make it
designed.
work.
Yeah, the
Because
building
then-
was designed to do that, to
Then
drive
you're
you
using
to
the ramp
the.
as a queuing space,
Yes.
and then you have the problem of how do you get people out? How
Yes.
do you make vehicles out? And your proposal, the way you explained it, was yes, that you're gonna pick up the vehicle and drop off the vehicle at the top of the ramp. So it was like, if the attendants are going down 2 levels, how does the attendant know somebody's standing there, they want their car?
Then you need more than
Well,
2
Well, they said there
attendants.
was somebody on remote camera.
Let me
I
give
thought.
you the whole spiel. I put together a bulleted cheat sheet.
Oh, another piece of paper.
For everyone. I know.
Thank you.
Killing trees today. This should walk you through it, but I'll give you the highlights. So
4 valet.
So the idea here is that we're going to have 2 valet at the top and 2 valet at the bottom, radio communication. So that when someone arrives, they stop here in the threshold, and this is an at-grade threshold. The ramp doesn't go down until 30 feet upon coming in. So this is a level area where someone could easily walk out of their car. It's actually ADA accessible because it's level. Give their keys immediately to a valet who takes it down.
With the
Gone.
person inside, because that's what I would want.
Well, we haven't discussed that, but
No, but seriously, I mean, I understand what you're going through here, but the building was designed with the parking, right? We're not talking about a new building that we're starting from scratch, and the building was designed with parking, where the elevator is very specifically, I mean, this is very standard garage design. The elevator bank is in the parking garage. You're supposed to drive your car, leave it off down at the bottom of the ramp, right next to the place where there's currently a little check-in guy, and you hand him the keys, and you walk about 20 feet, and you're in the elevator. So what you're talking about will discourage anyone from parking in this parking garage.
Yeah, I'm not sure why this particular option you're suggesting, because I think as originally laid out, I would prefer that because it allows for the queuing. And as the chair pointed out, it does lead the visitor or the user of the occupants of the building to directly access the elevator without having to go outside in inclement weather or even for ADA accessibility. So I'm trying to understand why this is being presented. What is the question that we raised that's leading to this? I don't think that was.
The goal was to eliminate a condition, because we know, we've heard this from the board on several occasions, eliminate a condition where two people are unfamiliar with the property and unfamiliar with the garage, find themselves going opposite directions within the building. And we know that that is a more severe situation than anything that would be created from this. But
Isn't that called having a red light on the outside that indicates a car's coming up the
we have
ramp?
one of those. The building is-
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just spoke to the developer who's sitting in the audience, and he said if the board is happy with having the passengers or the drivers come down the aisle, we're happy with that too. We thought the other way might be a better way to go, only because of LA. Right now, the way it's operating, there is a valet right by the threshold to the driveway. So that's how it's operating now, and there haven't been any accidents. So to us, we said, well, if it hasn't been a problem so far, we might as well maintain the current operation because it's been fine. However, we're not so attached to it. If the board thinks that it would be a better idea to do it the other way, we're happy to do that too. So
It's just confusing because most garages are designed like this, so what I'm trying to understand is how come all of a sudden it's a defective design? You know, where you drive down and you leave your car off down there and then you walk right to the elevator. It sounds like the whole idea of a garage design is being kind of thrown out now in these studies because for some reason now they need to station a guy at the mouth of the garage because the basic design doesn't work in the building anymore.
So we're happy to go the other way. I think what happens in these applications is that we attend your review session, we overanalyze every little detail in all of these applications. And it looks like just in this application, we overanalyzed to a fault, and we tried to come up with a way that we thought would satisfy the board and provide the most safely efficient way for a vehicle drop off and pick up. If the board disagrees with it, as I said, that's fine with us. We're happy to.
Well, I have a question. If this is the current operation and it's been successful, I think the reason we asked the question is maybe that's one of the reasons why the garage is not being utilized.
It's intimidating.
It's because of the nature of it. But I think we then definitely need to look at the utilization, current utilization and ins and out to understand how well or how not so well it's being used, and then maybe we can evaluate these based on that. That's why this placement is a little bit incongruous without having that information. Am I making sense?
So moving forward, exactly what would you like us to do?
So I guess if you're showing us this, I would like to know what the current utilization is and how that is operating. And based on that, maybe we will, we can kind of, if the utilization is very high or not so high. I mean,
We know it's low, there's no cars in the.
Yeah.
But so this is the thing, Mr. Rothkru's going to do a utilization rate because he's doing a study, right, or they did a study, right? So it's already showing us the utilization rate of the current system where there's a guy who stands out there and scares you away from parking.
He's not that scary. He's just a valet
A
attendant.
study should show who's driving to the
Yes,
site. So
right.
we could even be conservative and say if every person who's driving to the site wants to park down there.
Right.
Can park down there and then figure it out
Yes,
ourselves.
correct. And that would be the assumption, not that they parked on the street,
Right.
but that they should be parking in the lot and they should get some sort of a little thing on their way out of the of their visit saying, next time, please park in our lot, it's free valet parking, which sounds sort of
And now you can
elegant.
leave the car by the elevator.
Yeah.
Better.
Right. And you just have to make, those paths have to be handicap accessible. So, but.
Yes, and where there's also an ambulant drop-off location.
Yeah, well, I realized that the area on Quentin Road is a no parking zone,
Yeah.
right? So, actually, you would have the queuing area down your ramp and possibly on Quentin, and I thought the best, like, can you have a handicap drop-off near the front door on,
What we were thinking of, we saw your comment, what we were thinking about doing is sending a request to the Brooklyn Commissioner of DOT for an ambulance drop-off zone right on 9th.
yeah.
In front of that main lobby, because that's where it's logical for anyone who's coming in ambulance, and see if they would, look favorably on that request. They have in the past. Can't guarantee it, but something like this clearly warrants that type of curbside space.
And then, is there a way for somebody who drops off their car on Quentin to go inside the building and walk to the elevators?
I'd have to confer with building management on that. That would require a revision to the architectural layout of that area, so I'd have to confer with them.
A drop-off at Quentin, you mean where it is right now? where
Well,
they're-
if they were gonna do it the way they are. If they're
It's-
gonna go down in the cellar, then that's, I don't think that's, because they could go straight to the
You'd have
elevator.
to walk through the pharmacy to the elevator bank.
Unless you create a separate corridor that
Well, if they're gonna have,
access
if
all
they
the way
wanted
to
to,
the-
that was only if they kept the
But
drop-off
these
at
two
the top.
pharmacies are related to each other. You'd be subdividing the pharmacy.
And then it was a
There's
little,
already a tenant there.
Right.
in your sub-cellar, you show these handicap spots with a space for the person to get out of the vehicle. So that means to me that the handicapped people are going all the way down to the sub-cellar.
Yeah, that was not the intention with the plan I was laying out. It's a carryover from a prior plan, but the idea would be to take everyone out here. And we were going to allow a special provision for people with special needs or handicapped people that they could pick up their vehicles in the cellar or sub-cellar via the elevator and then be escorted up via a valet, so that there's no issues with someone navigating a one-way or, a narrow road bed.
No, but I thought this is also about cars that have special operations that a
Correct.
valet couldn't
You could have
drive.
a van, a van that.
No, not a van. A car for a disabled person who drives with their hands or something like that. That's not something a valet can drive,
Yeah, they
right?
would
So
go-
that person drives themselves into the lot.
Yeah.
I think in that case, you'd be escorted down the ramp under the plan that I was prepared to explain. You'd want someone to usher you down just to make sure there's no conflicts.
Just to continue with that, if I'm picking up when I'm leaving the premise,
Yes.
am I picking up the car in the cellar or
No,
out there?
the plan that that I laid out in that cheat sheet essentially, and this could change once we, collect ourselves and determine if what the board was referring to with respect to going all the way down is acceptable. What we were prepared to essentially develop and go with was, there is a lobby on the 9th Street side, where essentially that's where you come in the building. The person in the lobby has the ability to communicate with the valets downstairs. So when that person's done with his or her appointment, or for whatever reason that person's there, notify the lobby attendant, that person would radio down and say, get the black Acura with the license plate ending in whatever, and then that car would be brought up by valets and they would rendezvous on the street. And that would basically ensure that the person who's eventually driving the vehicle only has to do so here and then out.
But but the person has to go to the attendant on Quentin Road and then wait for their car to come out on the street.
No, the person would go to the lobby.
To the lobby, and then you have to wait for them to walk around directly and hope that they're not going to clog up the driveway.
What I would expect is that someone would wait there, and then the person in the lobby would hear from the radio, I have the black Acura, it's at the top, send them around. And the person would take a 20 or 30 second walk and walk around, or or they might wait there if it's a nice day. You know, I mean, it's a matter of minutes, really.
Well, that's the case where I think, since you have another garage door and the entry for the for the first floor, that there could be some sort of corridor. If you want to insist on keeping it at the top, that it would make more sense to me to
be able
have
to
a way
walk.
to walk through the building.
That we will have to speak with the building management about that.
But, I mean, I just have a question. If you have somebody standing at the top of the ramp, right, that person can control the traffic in or out. Why can't you just have the drop off and the pickup in the cellar and then just have the person at the top of the ramp go, nobody's coming, let them through, and then the person at the bottom of the ramp tells the person in the car, okay, drive up the ramp, you're good.
We could very well do that.
Being that isn't this a cancer center? And I'm thinking that people aren't gonna really feel like walking around the block
No
after
way.
perhaps having chemotherapy and
Right.
stuff like that.
We
They just
can-
wanna
we
go
can
to the
absolutely do
car.
that. That's-
But you seem to be reluctant about the drop-off and pickup in the cellar.
We have been, this whole plan was developed on the basis that the board has concerns about two-way flow on essentially a one-way aisle. So we adapted a plan that would essentially never have a situation where you would have a customer interacting with someone in the opposite direction. That was the mindset behind this. We felt that that was more severe of an issue than anything that would happen at the driveway level. So that was the mindset. It's not that we're against it, because it's a common occurrence throughout New York City, but we've heard the board on several occasions have concerns about that. We want to address it.
Right, but can I just volunteer a nuance to that? Had to do with the lack of maneuverability in the garage itself, which would have forced more people onto that ramp, whereas here, you've got lots of reservoir spaces on each floor.
Right.
You've got plenty of spaces to lay somebody over for a few minutes while somebody comes down the aisle or goes up the aisle. You also have that no parking on Quentin, so you even have space on the street where an attendant can say, hold it right there 1 second, somebody's coming up, and then funnel you down. So there is a difference. So it's not like the board is just arbitrarily changing its mind on something that's clearly a concern. It's just that this is a different situation.
Sure.
Jessica Rubenstein here again. I see the representatives of the building are in the back just nodding their heads, telling me it's fine. So we're okay with that. Yes.
And maybe
All
that'll
right.
improve your parking utilization.
I hope so.
Well, it won't,
That'd be
because the
nice.
survey's done based on this, but, so we won't know.
We'll
But
see.
you
We
have
won't
to
get to
figure
find
out a
out.
way so that there's no two-way traffic on the ramp.
Well, I do want to point out, the ramp does have a signaling system now. There's actually embedded detectors in the pavement that essentially, if, let's say this is the ramp on each floor, it essentially makes certain that no one passes this point coming up if someone's here. What we wanted to do is avoid the condition where someone is coming up because they have the green light and then a new customer arrives.
Right.
And that's a situation that could happen. We wanted to avoid that, and this was the thinking behind that. But-
Okay, I think we got this,
Yeah.
right? All right, are there any speakers on this? All right, so basically what it's still coming down to is credible studies about the parking requirements, right? So that's what we need. Yes, so that's what we need. I don't think there was anything else, actually. Maybe marking on the plans where the proposed ambulette drop-off would be. And I think that's about it, right? Okay. So what are we talking about, timing-wise?
We're ready to submit in 2 weeks.
Because the study's going to be so perfect. I don't feel 2 weeks is, no, the
Okay.
study's done at a certain level. It needs to be done at an amazing level, proofread so many times, everyone in his family is bored. So.
Yes, but also to give the board the reassurance, we started revising the study about 2 months ago, when on a different application, the board gave us similar advice. So it's not that Hiram is going back now to the drawing board, he's been working on it for a few months. It's going to be great.
You have to say it's going to be paid.
Oh, I took your pen, I'm sorry.
Come through.
Still, we're at like the 20th or 27th or something,
Yeah, the
right?
20th is the soonest.
Is 20th the best
one with a, not too, parking? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there's only like one other with a parking study like this, right? Because we had the.
Okay, and what's the 27th look like? Just to not have us do 2 parking studies in one day.
And there's a new parking study, and that one's a monster
Oh.
on the 27th. I would recommend.
Okay, the 20th.
not
All right, so
having-
June 20th with a
Actually.
submission on May 31.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Item number 3, 2016 4133 BZ, 2018 East 4th Street, Brooklyn.
Good evening.
Not quite.
Good evening.
It's still afternoon, in spite of how we all feel.
Don't make us feel bad. Doesn't it feel that way?
Yes.
Lyra Altman from the Law Office of Lyra Altman. We did have somebody attend your executive session yesterday and heard your comments. Regarding the proof of service, I apologize for not having submitted it. It was an oversight. I will just show it to you so you have proof. But in the meantime, that I did actually do it as required by your board. But I will, of course, submit it to you properly as well. Floor to ceiling heights, there was a question. You are correct, they're changing from 12 inches to 15 inches. It is not a removal of the existing floor joist, it's the addition of radiant heat on top of the existing joist.
Radiant heat.
That is the
Nice.
3 inches. I apologize.
Can you repeat again?
It's radiant
We need
flooring.
to tell them to keep it down.
Okay.
They're putting radiant heat in, that's what the, I know.
I agree, yeah, nice.
So they're putting 3 inches on top, that's why the change. It's not a change in the joist itself, it's
Okay.
just something going on top of the joist. Regarding the dormers on the sections, the dormers going through the sections, the dormers weren't shown because the cross-section was actually taken behind the dormers, facing rear, and it wasn't shown on the
Oh.
longitudinal section because it goes right down the ridge. Going down the center ridge, you would never see the dormer.
Right, okay.
That's why the dormers, they weren't left off, they weren't shown from those
They're
angles.
behind you. on
Exactly
that.
right. What he tries to do is he tries to do it towards the rear of the building because that's where the most change is typically occurring. That's why.
One convention is you show them dashed and you indicate.
We can have that done if you'd
behind.
like.
Yeah, just because it helps you understand the
Absolutely.
massing.
It's not a problem.
Pieces for thickness.
So I'll have it shown in dashed line.
Yeah.
No problem.
And with a
Again,
little
I
note
assume-
that indicates behind.
This will only be on the cross section because the other goes right through the ridge.
Yeah.
Okay. Regarding 23461C4, we actually do comply,
Okay.
and I will go through the details on it. 23461C4 requires a 5-foot side yard adjacent to a lot. And I'm going to read, I apologize, because I want to make
No,
sure
it's okay.
I give it to you properly. To a lot with a detached building with at least 13 feet of side yards, with both side yards at least 5 feet in width. When you look at the building on the left, you see that the side yard adjacent to us is 2 feet. So we don't have both side yards at least 5 feet on that lot, so we don't have to worry about it on that side. On the other side, when you look at both the radius diagram, the survey, and the floor area study, kind of look at them together, what you see is the adjacent lot on the right has a 7-foot, 10.5-inch side yard adjacent to our property. The other side has a very small, undersized
Okay, so
side yard.
full
Whether
under.
it's 2 feet or 3 feet, I couldn't tell you, but it is without a doubt not 5 feet. Not
Okay.
even question, and you can see that looking at both the aerial view on the floor area study, the aerial view on the rear yard study. You could see it when you look at the additional photos that were submitted to your board. So
Okay.
that's why we comply with that section.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the dormer overwhelming the base roof height, what I did was I looked at the heights on that block, and I also looked at streetscape montage and some aerial views just to get a view. What I was able to see is that there were actually a number of lots on this block that have dormers that line up with the peak of the roof. The reason you don't see it is they're set back, which, similar to the other application I have on after this will also be set back. But the problem is, and you said it yourself, when you do these elevations, you're collapsing everything forward, so it really doesn't give an ideal view of what's going to be happening. But if I were to show you,
Because most of the time dormers are subservient to the main roof.
it may be the case in some places, but I can tell you on this block, without a doubt, it's not. I'm going to show you our lot. I apologize for which one is marked, it's not on our lot.
But you're going to hand that to us after.
Of course
you
I
do it.
will,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm just going to show you where we are. You're right here, and you see this building, this building, and I'll give you lot numbers as well. It's a little difficult to see because I was trying to get it all onto one sheet so you would see that it was
Is
all
your
one
lot
continuous
marked
run.
here? I don't know which one it is.
Our lot, let me show you which is our lot.
Oh, there, oh, okay.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner.
Well, it shows something.
And
with
for
lots of
reference, for
dormers
everybody
already.
who's looking at maybe the streetscape montage that we provided you or other documents we provided you, the lot numbers are lots 168, 170, 186, and 188. All four of those buildings on this block. There, I think it's the third and fourth in from the top of the block, and I'll say the fifth and sixth in from the bottom, something like that. Maybe it's a fifth and sixth on the top, third and fourth on the bottom, I could be slightly off. But you will see that a number of them do line up. It's just difficult to see from some of the angles due to the fact that they are set back, similar to the way our dormers will be. Would you like me to pull it up on a screen? Would that be easier? I'd be happy to show it to you zoomed in on a screen.
No, it's okay. Sorry.
So we did feel that this fit within the character of this block because it is a very common occurrence on this particular block. I won't speak to others because obviously they're not relevant to this application.
It's hard to see in these images. You have to look at it as an aerial view. Then you can see where the
That's the problem.
spring of the dormer is.
Exactly. That's why I printed. I thought that might be a little more helpful than looking at all the streetscape photos. With everything set back so
Yeah.
far and standing on the ground taking the photo, you really can't see where they touch each other. Whether it's 2 feet below the peak or at the peak. It's difficult otherwise.
Okay.
Also, regarding a statement that this complies with the Special Ocean
Right,
Parkway District,
that just whether the special district affects the zoning of this property.
it's actually listed on the top of page 2 on the Statement of Facts and Findings.
And what was the conclusion? Sorry.
That we're fine with all sections of the Special Ocean Parkway District. The only problems we have are the waivers that we're requesting. We comply with everything else.
Oh, this is
It is specified.
saying this one.
You say you comply, but
We
what
comply.
are the provisions?
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
That's what I meant.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you were saying we didn't say that we complied with the section. I'm like, we do.
I just didn't know were there special provisions of the Special Ocean Parkway District.
Most of the Special Ocean Parkway District deals with things that are along Ocean Parkway.
Exactly.
Front yards,
Right.
landscaping, which
Some of
doesn't
them
affect
do.
us. The other thing it deals with are community facilities, which clearly this is not a
Right,
community
so
facility.
I
It
thought that
doesn't
there was
impact
no,
us. There is no impact, but we do comply with the requirements.
That's what I thought,
Yes.
but that's what I was looking for.
You are correct. I apologize if I
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
clear on that.
Okay.
Okay. You have what you need?
Yeah, that there are no requirements.
No
It
requirements.
doesn't affect this.
It affects somebody on
Okay.
community facilities and on Ocean
Right,
Parkway.
yeah.
We are neither.
Yeah.
But I do state in there that we comply with all the requirements, of which there are none.
Okay, and I just wanted to check with Commissioner Montanez. You were concerned about retention of existing fabric?
Right. I looked at the plans again, I think it's pretty clear.
Okay.
But then I was concerned about the FARs that are over the .85, that don't have resolutions, and,
I
you
did the
know...
research on that as well for you.
Okay.
It was a very exciting evening last night.
I'll bet.
Until 1 o'clock when I heard, I have boogies, I need my mommy. Then I was back in it too. What I was able to tell you is one of them actually was pulled, the one that's a .85, which is lot 87 on the bottom right, Gloria study, that one was pulled off the BIS system. B2, what?
I
Okay.
think it's okay.
The 2 BSA, I have the resolutions if you'd like me to hand those up to you just for the record.
Okay.
And the calendar numbers are listed below, of course.
So those tie into the studies that you did?
Yes, they're on the study that you've already been provided with the
okay.
calendar numbers. These are just the actual resolutions if you'd like to
Okay.
have them.
And the resolutions note the FAR?
Of course,
Yeah.
that's where we obtain
Okay,
that
because some
information.
resolutions don't.
Yeah, it depends on the resolution. These are from '08 and '12. The ones that don't tend to be 2002, 2003, and 2004. So, but these do have it in there. The others were from Oasis, and what I did was, because I don't just rely on Oasis, I actually cross-checked the Department of Buildings website to look for any violations. The vast majority of them have no violations, both ECB and DOB. Any violations that I did see, I checked what they were. I will give you, without going through each specific property, I will just give you the list of what the violations were. Please stop me if you'd like to know which property it is. One had a fence and DOT permit issue. One had a failure to provide protection at the sides of excavation. There were some dismissed violations. There were 2 safety equipment violations. 1 closed violation with no information beyond the fact that it was closed. Then there was one that said we didn't provide the approved plans on site. and work contrary to approved plans, which was cured, an important detail. And then there was one occupied without a C of O, 2 cured, and 2 certificates accepted. Those last 3 violations were all on the same site. So the vast majority of the violations were not truly relevant for the
Okay,
buildings.
thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Okay. All right, so I don't think we actually need anything else, despite what I might have said something about.
There was something about the dash line.
It was the dash
The dash
line.
line, yeah, never mind
But
about that.
yeah.
It's not, it was only if we were going to do other stuff. Okay. Does anybody have any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay, there are 0 speakers on this, because I'm looking and the audience is empty, save one person who seems to be connected with the
Well,
various application.
I actually threatened to oppose the last applications. He said he was staying to oppose mine.
Okay. So I'd like to make a recommendation or to close this, or a motion to close it. It's not a recommendation. It's called
make the
motion to
motion.
close.
Chair
I'm the
Perlmutter?
mover.
You're the one who makes the motions.
Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chanda?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye. And a motion to grant.
On condition?
On condition, thank you, because it says right there.
Yeah.
That the retention of walls and joists as shown on the plans are conditioned to the approval or the special permit is void.
I believe that's always a condition, is it not?
Well, no, you know what it is?
It may not be written, but it is always.
It's always a condition, but it's written in particular when it's kind of close, right? Right, because.
I have no opposition to that at all.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that everybody knows, so
Yeah, that's fine.
to the extent anyone can know.
We always consider that as a condition anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Chair Perlmutter?
Aye.
Vice Chair Chanda?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 4, 2016-4178BZ, 1981 East 14th Street, Brooklyn.
Yeah, there was a.
Calendar number 2016-4181BZ.
Right.
Hello again, Lara Altman from the Office of Lara Altman.
No,
I should have
think it's
mentioned in the
wrong.
prior application, and I will mention it now, that our architect had originally intended to be here, but he was called up for jury duty starting yesterday.
Okay.
And I know that Ms. Monroe is aware of that from our recent meeting with him on another application. We had a pre-application meeting with him.
Wait, sorry, I think the application, the calendar number is incorrect. There are 24181s.
Calendar number on this is 2016-4181BZ.
Yeah. And the one prior is also,
No,
I
it's
think.
4133.
Oh, this is the one that's
The prior is
33. Oh,
4133.
okay, so it was wrong on this. Okay. Sorry.
Not a problem.
Please proceed.
We again had somebody attend your executive session, watched the tape as well, heard your comments. Regarding the rear yard addition, I believe it was now established that that was legal. I just want to confirm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
Not a
missed
problem.
that document, yes.
You're
it's-
reviewing 26 cases,
It's
I
rare
understand.
that you can find drawings from 1961 that actually are still in the buildings department
And legible.
and legible,
It
and actually
was-
make your case, because a lot of times there's a drawing that has
I
nothing
have
to do
to
with
tell you,
anything.
we were as pleased as you can imagine. When we pulled that out, we could not have been any happier that we were able to
No,
find
that's
those.
pretty
It's phenomenal.
astonishing, okay.
Yeah, Sal did a good job on that.
All right.
Also, there was a question regarding the demolition, what was being maintained, what wasn't. What's being maintained are many walls in the cellar, as you see, 3 portions of walls on the first floor, ranging from 4, 6 1/4, 18, 2 3/4, and 30, 3 1/2. If you look at the plans, what this architect does to try to make it a little easier is surrounding the building, he has marks that say proposed or existing. Do you see that? In addition to the shading. He tries to clarify. You see that? It's something that only he does, and I actually think it's very helpful if you're trying to, at a quick glance, see what's happening. At least I find it helpful. It gives you real dimensions on things.
Okay.
He's also maintaining portions of walls on the second floor, as well as joists on first floor, second floor, and attic level. And I will tell you, I know there was a question regarding how those floor joists were going to remain. He's anticipating holding them up with temporary supports during construction, and then, of course, once the building is complete, those temporary supports can come out because the walls that will be holding them up properly will be there.
So wait a second, so, I'm sorry, I just got to the drawing.
Not a problem.
So, okay, part of my thinking was when I was assuming the extension wasn't legal, so I was ignoring the 18 feet of existing.
Understood.
right? So, what are you saying he does that makes it clearer?
If you look, if I may.
In the dimension
Oh, he says existing
or proposed.
or proposed.
So on
Oh,
the
I
second floor, you're only keeping 12 feet? 6
On the
feet
second
on
floor,
each
he's
side?
keeping 4'6" and 6'1". Those are the two portions.
10 feet.
On the second floor, correct. But on the first floor, he's keeping quite a bit more than that. On the cellar, even more than that.
Well-
And the floor decks on all 3 floors, first, second, and attic.
So the thing is, the reason it's of concern is if you only keep the first floor joist, that's basically the roof of the cellar, right? So the whole idea is that you're keeping enough of the second floor to create an enclosure that is floor area.
Well, the first floor has enough of an enclosure to be...
No, but that's the thing, what I mean is, the first floor has a floor, okay,
Right.
and a wall, but then there's nothing being retained above.
Yes, the floor joists are being maintained on the first, the
But
second,
how
and the
if
attic.
the second floor shows nothing being retained?
We're retaining some walls, but we are also retaining the floor deck on all of them. What he's going to be doing is he's using temporary supports to
Okay,
maintain
so you know
those.
what would help, sorry to interrupt
No.
you. The other application, the one right before this, they did this very helpful thing of showing the floor plate of the joists that were being retained.
On the proposed plans, you want to show the joists retained?
Yeah, that was makes it really clear where's the existing building, because when I look at the second floor, I don't find anything other than that one little 6-foot thing, which nobody would keep, frankly, if you're doing construction, you don't keep 6 feet.
Well,
The
the plan is to
contractor
tell
will
the
go
architect.
insane. What?
The plan is to tell the contractor that these are the choices unless you don't want to have your special...
No,
permit.
actually, having been an architect in the field, the contractor rarely does what the architect tells them, and the architect, right.
I will tell you, Sal is very careful, and I know you know Sal very well from having seen him through here a number of times. He's very particular on his jobs, and he's very careful about who gets involved in his jobs.
Right, no, but I understand that there is no way you're going to get a contractor to keep a 6-foot length and build around it. They're just not going to do it.
They want to, the homeowner wants a special permit.
Yeah, well, so we need to see how they're going to be maintaining the joists that they claim they're maintaining, because at the moment, I don't see any joists
Okay, so what I'll do-
surviving here on the second floor.
What I'll do is I'll have him show on the proposed plans the outline of what's being kept
Yeah,
and explain how it's being done. Is that
yes.
sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is because of this strange cantilever thing that we see occasionally, because the line of the building on the second floor isn't going straight up, right? So if the line of the whichever wall that is, the wall on the north wall had been retained all the way up, then you have a clear case of a retention of a building. But as soon as you demolish that wall and you don't have anything left on the other wall, because that's totally new, you really don't have a building above.
The reason that wall is being moved is to make enough room for the bedrooms. That wall doesn't get moved on the first floor because they have enough space. On the second floor, they really need that space.
Well, I think
Well,
that
not a
that
bedroom.
Right, you have an
doesn't
office
comply
and
with the
bath.
234661C, which is an open area of 8 feet between buildings.
But the open area in between buildings, that only applies if you're changing the side yard. We're not changing our side yard. Both of our side yards are
I don't know
remaining
if that's-
existing required side yards. You're allowed to
It's
do it.
increasing the degree of nonconformance.
Well,
Non-compliant.
but the-
Non-compliance.
If you read the language actually in 73622, what it allows you to do,
No,
it allows you to
isn't
extend
it
a pre-existing...
23461C?
No, she's saying in the special
73622,
permit
the
line.
special
Okay.
permit. We're not talking as of right now, of course. 73622 allows you to extend a pre-existing non-compliant legal, point down legal, side yard. You can extend it horizontally or vertically. So you're not changing the distance between the building, and what it says actually is specifically, you are not allowed to, let me read it to you out of the section, make life easy for everybody. It says an enlargement within a side yard shall be limited to an enlargement within an existing non-complying side yard, and such enlargement shall not result in a decrease in the existing minimum width of open area between the building that is being enlarged and the side lot line. So the distance between the lot line and the building's side yard is not changing. We're extending it without a doubt, vertically and horizontally, but we're not changing the distance, the minimum distance between the building and the lot line, which is what 73-622 specifies.
I don't have it in front of me, but isn't there something about the ability of the adjacent building to also enlarge?
Not in 73-622, there's not.
Okay.
If you'd like to see
Because
it,
my feeling is that if you do this enlargement, then you would prevent the other building from ever being able to enlarge, even if it was permitted according to their side yards.
He can do.
Because of
once
the
again-
8-foot distance
Well,
requirement.
what he's allowed to do is, if he were to go for a special permit, he could do a vertical and horizontal.
No, not a
extension on
special
his.
permit. In other words, an
As
as
of
of right
right.
enlargement. So we need to
See
look
his
at,
numbers.
we need to look at that language more carefully. I mean, this is a subject we've talked about a little bit where you've got, for instance, in this, isn't this the one where there's a little bit of a bay window?
on the
and
opposite
that
side of the
is-
building from what we're
Yeah,
discussing
and this
now.
bay window, which technically, like, what's a bay window, but it has a floor, right? And the board has treated that as the setting the side yard when it's only a tiny percentage of that side yard. I personally have trouble with that, but, you know.
And
And
yeah,
the
it
text-
does talk about
Yeah,
impairing
Henry
the
and I talked
future
about
use or
this,
development of the surrounding area. So I feel if you're granted this extension of the side yard, which is increasing the degree of non-compliance,
But we're already there.
No,
only for a short distance.
Only for
Now
that
you're
bay
taking it all
window.
the way forward and to the second floor and vertically, that you will
I would
be
disagree on that.
impairing the ability of the adjacent homeowner to enlarge.
Well, the adjacent homeowner right now is technically pre-existing, legal or illegal, I don't know, because I didn't research his lot, I'm not going to attest to his legality. He's 4'10" from the property line in the rear. He's technically got an illegal side yard right now. So if he wanted to do a straight line, he couldn't do it as of right anyway. He would have to come to the SH to request that. He couldn't possibly do it as of right.
Well, even if he wanted to do a 5-foot side yard on the part where he steps in, he couldn't do that.
It would change him by 6 inches. You would have to do 5 foot 6 inch side yard, because we have 2.5 feet. I mean, that's what we're talking about, is 6 inches here.
Right,
But again, I would disagree, because we're not allowed to build at 3 feet. We're only allowed to build to extend to 2'6". And he could do it at 4'10". He has a condition that would allow him to extend similar to what we're doing. He's not blocked out of doing it. He can come to your board and say, look, I have
No, but you
assuming
can't
it's
count on
legal.
a special
legal
permit,
piece of
it
that.
has to, it shouldn't be that you assume.
I mean, the way the yard regulations work in some of these districts, that, like, it does actually happen where a neighbor is first in, they get their yard, and then the other neighbor has to sort of react to that.
It has
like-
to compensate.
Yeah, they have to,
We have-
and that
I've
happens
had
as of
clients-
right all the time.
There are
so-
times where my clients have been the ones
Not-
penalized because my neighbor did something. I will say I've had situations where the neighbor did something illegal.
Right.
And this board said, but you're going to be getting too close to him. But he built it illegally. I didn't even have a chance to argue with him, to discuss it with him. He built it illegally and my client's being penalized. We're doing it legally. We've alerted the neighbor. They haven't deposed.
Okay, so,
And again, he does have the opportunity, if he should so choose, to come to the board and do it at 4'10", assuming his is legal, which I won't attest to, because I don't.
so the thing is, there's a few things at play here where I'm not comfortable that you've got enough of the existing structure retained. And there's this open question about the subject that we have toyed with quite a bit over the last months, years already, about this reduction in the effective side yard when you've got a bay window or something, when you're reducing the distance between buildings or something like that, right? So I think that there's a couple of things, and when you say they need the space upstairs for a bedroom, but that's not true because it's an office and a bathroom that we're seeing in the drawing, so that's actually not how it's being used upstairs. So, and it sets back already on the third floor, which shows that you have a viable layout if you set back.
On the third floor.
On the third floor. The third floor actually picks up the line that would have been there on the second floor had you held that line. So if you held that line, then I'd
Are
be
you
mo-
discussing which side of the building? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same
this
side
is the
you are.
north
The
side
north
of the
side.
building, the side, yeah, the side away from the bay window.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the same side.
Yeah, I mean, because for me, the critical part is, I feel like this is basically a demolition, because you just don't have enough existing fabric being retained. And you would retain enough fabric if that was a straight line back to the rear yard extension.
And I think if you needed to maximize space for the office and others, there are two set of staircases, and I think that could be consolidated in a way that would allow for you to, make up that room on the other side and yet allow for that setback on the northern side. So
Right.
it's not, there's much of a compromise that is being made in terms of the number of rooms either.
Right.
I'll speak to the architect about that. As I said, he had to perform his civic duty starting yesterday. So as much as he had anticipated being here, he was out of his control.
I mean, we have seen projects where there are two sets of stairs were required because of the different heights, but here, I don't see that. I see there is very
Let me
possibility
speak to
of
him, because he's the
of
design expert.
consolidating
I wouldn't
the stair
pretend
in
to
a
be the
way.
design expert on this.
Yes.
I think, having.
That'd be unfair.
Saul can come.
Sal, yeah.
There's also a lot of
So he's responsive.
circulation.
If you give
Right.
him that note, he may just
I will.
figure out
Right.
a way to do it.
Right, yes.
And I will give him a
And there's
transcript
also a
of
lot
that.
of unnecessary circulation on the first floor. I mean, there's a lot of space to play with. So, okay. All right. So next time, of course, you'll come back with the architect.
course. Well, there were a few other items we wanted to discuss. Or you wanted to discuss, I assume. I should continue with those? Or we can just say they're okay and go on with our day. I'll let you go.
Correct, that a house has been, well, so if we talk about reduction of the width of the building because of this whole issue of retention of existing fabric, then we've addressed the massiveness of the house, right? So,
I don't know that that would change for the entire building, though. Remember, we're talking about one specific spot. Maintaining it is up in the front of the building, there's that cantilever. In the back, he may say, I can do it right in the front and not in the back. I can't speak to
no,
that.
the
'cause
back
I-
already has the first floor extension.
Correct.
So since it's an existing first floor extension, you're maintaining existing fabric, so running up on
Correct.
top of that, and I think that's what your second floor looks like.
Yeah.
Your second
Right.
floor follows it without the curve.
Correct, and the curves obviously being,
Yeah, that's a new curve. So actually, yeah, see, that's what I mean. The second floor doesn't even show following the line of the rear yard extension.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
So there's, the rear yard extension.
Correct.
Supposedly 18 feet of which is being maintained. And then so then, when I go to the second floor, I don't see any of the existing, because it's only a
One-story
one-story.
structure.
and
It's only
Yeah,
one
it's
story
only
and
one
one
story.
story.
We can't
Yeah.
maintain what
Right,
doesn't
okay,
exist.
never mind.
If it were there, we would keep it.
No, so you would follow the line of the extension, because that's already there, but you can cut back. It's already there and it's not existing fabric. I mean, that's the part of the point, is you need to have something existing on the second floor to hold up the walls and the joists. Otherwise, you don't have anything to hold them up, all right?
I will speak to Sal about that.
Okay. So,
There was also a question regarding the height.
yes,
And
so,
what I did was I looked at the heights of other buildings on our side of East 14th Street. There are at least 3 other buildings on this block that are 40 feet or higher. They're actually 40 feet to 42 feet is the range. So a 40-foot height is not out of line with what's going on this particular block, on this particular side of the street. I just looked down the entire block, and you can see that on the streetscape montage. It goes down the block. There were others, by the way, that are 38, 39 feet, but 40 and above, because we're proposing 40, there are at least 3 that I was able to confirm.
but when you show the streetscape, I mean, really, when you look at the massing of the house, it's a big house on a relatively small lot. And so, and that's what And in terms of its massing, it's an awkward big house on a small lot. So, and then when you look at it on your streetscape study, the drawing, it's much taller than its neighbors, and I don't know why.
What I would point out, first of all, is that when you look at this building, again, as you said, and I think you're correct, that we collapsed it forward by looking at it in elevation. When you look at the building, you're going to see the triangular shape on top, and the remainder is going to be set back significantly, just like we were discussing in the last application. If someone's standing on the street and looking up, they're not even going to really be able
Yeah,
to
but
see the dormers very well. So
You're collapsing all the other houses too, so,
Correct.
and we're looking at apples to apples of collapse,
yes and
right?
no, because you don't really see that when it's further back. So collapsing it forward gives an artificial idea that this building is much larger than it is. But as we were saying before, when we were looking at those buildings, we had to, in order to see the dormers properly, we had to look at a sky view. Why was that? Because you really don't see them as well as you think you do from the ground. You can see a portion of them, but you can't see if they reach the ridge line. You can't really see where they are. You can see a hint of them more than the actual full dormer.
You can see that this is a big house.
But
But
the
I'd
other
have to
thing-
say, if you really want to successfully make arguments for these big houses on these little lots, then the architect really needs to do, I think Ryan showed you a streets,
She did one, yeah.
yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about, for 1744.
So, I
that
mean,
would be helpful.
that's
Maybe
the
that would be-
vocabulary you're supposed, that's the language that architects are supposed to be using for making the arguments, that big stuff isn't big or fits within character. And, you know, I just wish they would get with the 21st century and do this stuff, because actually what Ryan drew is from about the 17th century, right? So if they can't
I
even
know
do
Sal's
17th
capable.
century,
Sal could do that.
you know?
Sal is certainly capable
He'll
of
do
doing
that.
anything we put in front of him.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in
Okay,
my mind on that.
so let him do some renderings to show the house in context and not use these little photo montage-y things that don't actually tell you the story.
Well, and he also provided you, I believe, axonometrics, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you in context. That just tells me it's a big house on a little lot.
Well, it also shows you,
Shows you the roof line and it
Doesn't
shows
really
you,
show you the envelope.
it doesn't show the envelope, it shows you kind of an idea of
The
what the building
perimeter.
is. It shows you that things are set
Parameters.
back, shows you where things sit on the building,
Right.
relative to the front and rear property lines effectively. That's what I think it's best for, is really getting more of a 3D view of it.
it gives you a little bit of information about the massing. It tells you whether the massing is awkward or delicate or whatever. It gives you a little bit of that, and then you look at the elevations to apply. I mean, it's definitely a big house. So to make an argument to support the big house, it really needs to be in context.
Remember, we're in a zoning district that also permits a 1.25 FAR. So
Well,
we're
then-
we're in a district that allows a high FAR.
But it doesn't allow all of these things that you're asking for, so, or not you personally, but your client is asking for. And so in order to be allowed to have all those things, it needs to fit within neighborhood
Correct, we're asking for the
context.
side yards and the rear yards specifically.
Right.
Regarding the rear yard, you're at 23 feet now.
Correct.
I didn't know why that wasn't sufficient, because you have two deep rear yards on either side.
I will, since we're going to bring Sal at the next hearing, I think I would rather defer to him on why it wasn't sufficient from a design perspective.
And
I think
then
he's more capable of answering that one.
I'm looking at P11, and it appears that a portion of the attic floor area in the storage area is over 8 feet in height.
Where is that? P11?
Section,
I'll look with you, please.
yeah. Plus, there's a very high roof line that's
Yeah,
not
that is
occupied.
awfully.
And I never understand these super high
Yes,
roof lines
right.
for no purpose.
Yeah,
It's an
this-
attic on top of an
The
attic.
building
I
can
don't,
easily start sloping back from that second floor, and that ridge line can be continued all the way to the back
yeah.
with minimal impact to the third floor rooms.
Yeah. And so then, and also in terms of the rear yard, you know, so I think, so we already have an existing structure in the rear yard, okay? So, and to fill it out on the first floor, we do that. And arguably, I mean, you're talking about a 3-story structure, right? And where's the third floor? Hold on a sec. The third floor happily is stepping back, right?
was gonna say,
But the roof line is picking up that line, and so it also adds mass to the rear. So the question really is about the second floor, and my concern, though I understand that you're backing up against a shallow rear yard.
A 5-foot rear yard, that's
Yeah,
correct.
on the two sides, those people have compliant rear yards, and one of them, the one to the south, has a compliant rear yard, and then his neighbor to the south has only a 19-foot rear yard, however that happened. And I don't know what the height of that 19-foot structure is. That structure is that creates it.
Okay, and I would point out that his rear yard has a very significant garage in it. The gentleman who is immediately to our right, which is the home that you're talking about. So his rear yard is pretty much taken up by his garage, or a good
Well,
portion of
his
it
rear
is.
yard, but what about his light and air on his second floor, which your proposal would then maybe box in? That's what I'm trying to understand. So the guy to the south of the neighbor
Right.
has only a 19-foot rear yard. I don't know what the height of the building is.
I will look
there.
into it and find
And
that
I'm
out
just
for you.
concerned that he'll find himself walled in on two sides.
One thing I'm going to point out to you that I think is valuable information, may not have been noticed, is that our side yard on that side is provided at 8 foot 1 inch. That's our driveway. His driveway is also on that side at 8 feet. So the distance between the two buildings is being proposed is 16 feet 1 inch, which is significant in this area of Brooklyn. Very rarely do you have a situation, normally what happens is you have driveway, small yard, driveway, small yard, driveway. So you end up having a small yard and a driveway adjacent to each other in the house. Then, it seems to go down the entire block this way, and I think you've seen that. It's rare that you have the two driveways adjacent to each other. Or I'll say less common, maybe not rare, but much less common. It seems to alternate that all the buildings were built either towards the right of the lot or towards the left of the lot, with the curb cut always on the right of the house down the block. That wasn't done here. So even with the proposal, he's got a 16-foot open space, which is more than most people ever will have or hope to have in this area of Brooklyn. I think that is important to note.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I understand what you're saying. If maybe that could be presented in some kind of graphic way to understand how the impact on the neighbor. I'm just concerned about the neighbor immediately to your south, who may be in a compromised position. So if you could put together like a graphic argument
Okay.
for why it's not going to have the impact that I'm thinking it's going to have, that would help.
Certainly.
Okay.
But I do understand the concern. I just think that this is a more unique situation in that there are two very large yards immediately adjacent to one another. Actually, both of them are 8 feet, which doesn't even always happen.
Okay. But, I mean, I think to the point that everyone's talking about, that you have an attic, you have a third floor, and then a very, very high attic,
I've
which
taken
could
note of that.
easily be reduced.
I've taken note of that, and I will speak with Sal about that and ask him what the rationale was and
Well,
what he
and
has to say about
to
it.
try and to reduce it,
I
as
will-
opposed to coming back to
I
tell
will
us the
mention that to him,
rationale.
of course.
Okay. Okay, good. Are there any speakers? There are no speakers. What are we talking about? You don't know what Sal's schedule is?
I can, yes, so we can have something in about 2 weeks with him.
I don't want to be Sal. Anyway, we don't have time for 2 weeks from now, so.
Time for us.
What's our?
I mean, let me look, we could do this on the 20th.
Yeah?
And, yeah.
On what date?
20th of June, 1, 2, May 31 submission.
In case that.
Give Sal a little bit of a break.
Calendar.
June
June
20th, May 31 submission.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This concludes the public hearing for April 25th, 2017.
Thank you, everybody.
Sure.
I have 22, I don't miss my German.